Altered State Adventures, The Mutiny of Baator. A crescent moon cast its milky glow over the black forest below, the canopy bathing in its presence while concealing all that remained underneath. Deeper still, on the forest floor and between the tall, gently swaying trees, rays of pale light came and went as the mild wind gently moved the clouds along. A misty rain, each drop illuminated by the moon like a million diamonds falling from the sky, was all that remained from a recently departed storm. Amidst the darkness of the forest, a faint light could be seen emanating from the windows of a small wooden hut, its foundations barely holding, panels broken and rotten, the roof covered in moss that had formed decades ago. Now, the stillness of the air was rudely disturbed as the crashing sound of breaking wood erupted into the night. Pazrael, cast out onto the forest floor, stumbled awkwardly and fell onto his stomach. The sound of metal grinding upon wood followed as Pazrael painfully rolled onto his back and watched as the chain devil emerged from the fire within. With deadly swiftness, the lesser devil thrust forward an arm and sent a barbed spike hurtling towards the dazed warrior. Pazrael rolled again as the spike dug into the mud with a puff of dead sticks and leaves. In one move, Pazrael reached for an arrow and fired. The projectile, glowing bright red with extreme prejudice, flew towards the devil and punctured its deep red skin. The devil let out a cry of anger as it pulled the arrow from its leg and launched into another violent attack against its human opponent. Pazrael rose to his feet and pounced forward. Now one man and one devil grasped at each other with violent intent, the devil clinging to flesh, its nails piercing down to the bone. The hunter desperately holding on to the cold steel chains that wrapped and guarded the lesser devil. As they tumbled and wrestled for dominance, grunts of struggle and groans of pain filled the night and echoed between the tall trees. Pazrael reached for another arrow and, holding it firm in his hand, lifted it high to bring it down hard into the devil's eye, but he hesitated. The devil, cruel in its ways, masterful of pain and torture, cunning in its evil, played trickery with the hunter's mind. For all Pazrael could now see were the eyes of his beloved, departed wife, staring back at him with tearful eyes, pleading, "Why? Why?" And all the while her arms squeezing him to his very last breath. Pazrael halted only for a moment, his experience shining through, and he plunged the arrow into the eye of the devil. The devil roared, let go of his hold, and stumbled briefly, his image shifting back and forth from the tender woman to the chained beast, his true form showing, red skin ripped and torn, gaping wounds of exposed flesh and innards seeped and bled, chains wrapped around his entire body. Another twirl of limb and chain sent a spiked flail towards Pazrael. The hunter ducked, and now a barbed hook cut through the air. The hunter rolled away and fired another arrow simultaneously. The arrow, like all that he would pull during this grueling battle, would again be glowing with pure red, fueled by hatred and anger. The chained devil lunged forward again, lifting Pazrael off his feet and plunging him down onto the hard ground. There was little use in attempting to roll the devil off. The weight difference was vastly against him. A cold, searing pain suddenly erupted in Pazrael's chest as two rusted metal hooks pierced and punctured the skin. The devil lifted the hunter up in one violent, swift move and thrust his body against the thick trunk of a nearby tree. Again, the devil shifted his appearance, peering into the hunter's soul, switching through the plethora of lost family members and those held most beloved. The devil began to smile, clearly enjoying the pain and sorrow that the beast saw reflected back at him in those dying eyes, and it was the gleam of pleasure that Pazrael noted for that glimmer of joy allowed for a moment of distraction. A distraction that Pazrael would use to reach for his sai, and pulling the enforced double-edged weapon from its sheath, promptly thrust the blade upward, through the devil's throat and into its brain. A guttural sputtering could be heard as the devil stepped backwards, blood spraying rapidly from the wound. Pazrael wasted no time as he fell to his knees, pulling another arrow from his quiver and launching it directly at the devil's forehead. It penetrated with a sickening thud, and the devil fell onto its back in a heap of flesh and bloody chains. The night fell silent once more. Pazrael reached out an arm for support as he dropped down to his side. He watched for some time as the devil lay there, the hut still burning in the background. His wounds were deep. He had lost blood, too much blood, and he was too far from any civilization for aid. Knowing, accepting the end was near, he focused on his breathing in an effort to drown out the pain. Laying on his back now, he noticed that the clouds had passed, and the stars in their thousands had come to watch him die. Constellations danced and twisted in his mind's eye, stars aligning to form the appearance of his wife, smiling, welcoming him. They would be reunited again soon. And as Pazrael watched the material plane slowly begin to fade, he noticed the wisps of heavy grey smog appear in his peripheral vision. He turned to see a cloud of smoke billowing from the remnants of the crumbling old hut and lingering mid-air. Adrenaline played its hand and forced Pazrael out of his trance. This smoke was not behaving as it should. It was not natural. It began to shift and take form. Human form. Pazrael briefly glanced over the slain devil. The beast was still lying motionless on the ground. He gathered the strength to sit upright and painfully grasped for another arrow. The one he retrieved shone yellow, a result of his present state of weakness, pain, and fear.
What is this?
He questioned. From within the smoky darkness of the newly formed human silhouette came the strange whisper of a distant voice, fading in, fading out.
Your arrows will do nothing against me, Ranger.
How do you know what I am?
I know everything about you, Pazrael.
The hunter rose, his voice stronger now, weakness suppressed by anger.
How do you know my name?
The smoky apparition emitted the faintest of chuckles.
I have been watching you for some time. An accomplished hunter of evil, are you not? Is that your life's work, hunter? Is that what you seek the most?
Pazrael shifted, remained silent as the voice continued.
What if I told you I could lift you from this place, transfer you to another realm, a realm where you could achieve your ultimate goal, eliminate the Lord of Evil, and put the underworld into self-destructive chaos?
Pazrael grimaced and shook his head.
I won't fall for your trickery.
Oh, but you haven't heard the prize. I would fix your broken body, as well as your broken heart. Bring back the departed, the one who gifted you with your special arrows, your beloved quiver.
Nothing can do that.
I can do that.
And how can I trust you?
You cannot trust me, Pazrael. You can only believe.
Pazrael watched as the smoke parted before him. A secondary silhouette appeared. A figure well known and dearly loved took shape. Pazrael's emotions were clearly visible. His body broken, his guard down, his mind susceptible to manipulation.
All I
All I ask is that you finish our common goal and eliminate Asmodeus.
Pazrael faintly laughed at the impossible task.
And how does this benefit you? Whatever it is that you are.
Without him, there is no more evil cast upon the mortal plane. It will wither and die like a parasite with no host. Let us be the ones to deliver that future.
Silence dawned upon them. The hunter deep in thought. The silhouette remained patiently waiting. This sorcery reeked of trickery and deception, but there was no more life left for him here. He was all but done for, fatally wounded, waiting to die. He had to go, had to try, for her sake. Pazrael rose to one knee and lifted his head toward the waiting apparition. For the briefest of moments, he thought he saw the shining glimmer of its eyes amidst the smoke, and upon uttering the words,
"Then I accept,"
Pazrael was taken from this realm and delivered to another. The searing heat of the desert sun burned upon Pazrael's skin. In a daze, he awoke. The heat instantly brought him back to the fire radiating from the forest hut, and he rose to his knees, alert, ready to fight. But this was far from any forest, far from any road, far from anything. In this strange place, the dry, dusty expanse of land stretched out to the horizon, where it was met by towering sand dunes, each one dancing in appearance, affected by a mirage that surrounded him entirely. He gathered himself and stood tall, stretching. A brief check confirmed that his wounds, although not entirely vanished, were healed. For now, the stranger had kept his bargain. In the distance, a collision of air caused a small whirlwind, which picked up a collection of loose dust and sand, before twisting and dancing across the dry desert plain. The whirlwind lasted for mere seconds, before simply dissipating into thin air. But the sound of the minor vortex shifted and continued immediately behind him. He turned in time to see the formation of the smoky silhouette. It appeared stronger in this realm, somehow more visceral, more real. Pazrael could make out the design of a tattered and torn robe of no discernible color, the hood drawn and effectively hiding the face within. Pazrael sighed.
Where am I?
The robed man did not answer the question, instead choosing to tell a tale of his own.
Thousands of years ago, before the dawn of time, when this realm was still young and life was rare, there was no light to lift the blackest night from its darkness. No light except that of the fire that lined the sky, as the tablet fell from the heavens.
A tablet? Is that what this is all about?
It is said that whence the tablet fell from the sky, its velocity was such that it ruptured and split in two.
And you want me to find them for you?
The smoke swirled violently, angry at the interruption.
The first segment was found here, in the searing heat of the desert. The second fell in a place called Ptolemesho.
Pazrael shrugged.
But I don't know this realm. How will I...
You will find them both for me. Bring them to me, and I will grant you access to the 9 hells.
Pazrael composed himself, ready and able.
And what do these tablets do exactly?
They are merely a necessary step towards our greater goal.
To defeat the Lord Asmodeus. Yeah, I remember. However you expect me to do that.
You will find a way. For now, you must concentrate your efforts on the tablets. Retrieve them for me. But beware, they are powerful beyond anything you have known before.
Oh, well, that's reassuring.
You must be of sound mind, as strong as I deem you to be. Do not give in to them.
What exactly do you mean? These tablets, where do they...
Retrieve them for me.
Pazrael shook his head as he cast his eyes over the monotonous, dusty terrain.
Where do I even begin?
But before the hunter could finish his question, the smoke had disappeared.
No, wait!
Dunes north and south, dunes east and west. He appeared to be in the middle of an ancient dried-out lakebed. The sky above was clear, a deep shade of blue. 2 blackbirds suddenly came into focus, circling high above.
Not exactly much to go on, but that's as good as any, I suppose.
And the decision was made. Pazrael sighed, briefly checked his weapons and possessions were in place, and then began the journey south. In the bustling harbour of Kolkata, the relentless and often suffocating humidity had been momentarily washed away by a rare and much welcomed bout of rainfall. The sound of wood, sail and lapping water was drowned out during the day by the banter of merchants, buying and selling their goods from exotic, faraway lands. But by night, the darker side of Kolkata came alive, and a different kind of trade began, one that would fulfill any vice a man desired. Further down the shore, where the piers and jetties of the harbourfront ended and the wood and stone gave way to sand, stood the Broken Compass Tavern. A seedy establishment, far from the more frequented and jollier inns on the seafront, away from prying eyes and populated by a clientele of a different nature. Pirates, smugglers, and the more deviant and daring of adventurers. The warm glow from inside lit the surrounding sand and exposed the few occupants drinking, smoking, and fondling outside. Inside, the smell of alcohol and smoke hung thick in the air, and the sound of bellowing laughter, cryptic chatter, and the clinking of tankards assaulted the senses. Pazrael sat by the window, slowly nursing an ale as he studied the folk around him. Disgust and despise filled his heart. If he could rid them all from their very existence, he would. This kind of folk, each and every one of them embracing the darker evil within, and treading over anything and anyone to satiate their sins. They were, however, the most reliable patrons of gossip, hearsay, and news of more illicit and felonious nature. Studying the clientele of this sordid place of business, Pazrael felt suddenly aware of how different his appearance was. This disputable crowd wore dirtied hats of varying shapes and sizes, their clothing often torn, always colourful, loud and flamboyant, and usually barely hanging onto their bodies. Pazrael, on the other hand, dressed sullen, dark, and in the same clothes he had adorned since his quest for vengeance had begun. Black boots, loose but comfortably fitting black trousers and jacket. The only colour he wore came in the form of blue satin, woven tightly around the forearms, and also used for his belt and long bandana that he presently wore around his head. The satin, once worn by his departed wife, became the constant reminder of why he chose the path he was on, why he dedicated his life to relinquishing this or any land from evil. It offered him a vision, allowed for his mind to focus. But now, Pazrael searched for something he could not see, looked for things he did not know the shape nor the size of, listened for words that even when heard, would have no meaning to him. A brief glimpse outside into the darkness of the horizon revealed a faint orange light somewhere out there on the vast greater ocean. It had been 3 months since his arrival in Kolkata, and his progress had been slow. Stories and tales of the fabled tablet could be heard in certain corners, but nothing came to fruition. Surprisingly, the smoky apparition of the robed man had not returned, though every once in a while Pazrael would feel a sharp pain where his wounds were located. A lingering aftermath of his battle with a chained devil, or a stark reminder that his part in this baffling quest had not yet been fulfilled. Outside, the orange light grew brighter, larger. Pazrael frowned as he finished his ale, gathered his effects, and rose to investigate. Outside, the night air was warm and thick with humidity. A salty breeze came off the ocean, carrying a strange sense of foreboding. Still, the light grew brighter in the darkness, taking shape now, revealing its carriage. Pazrael walked down to the beach, able to see the incoming ship. She was not stopping.
What madness is this?
A crowd formed around him as the ship became more noticeable. Questions could be heard, panic could be felt, chaos threatening to erupt. The sounds of disturbed howling could be heard blowing in on the wind, as if the ship herself was warning those before it. As the crowd grew louder and the ship drew closer with ever-increasing speed, men and women began to cry and run in all directions. The ship hit the seabed with tremendous force and bounced wildly upward. The speed in which she had been traveling thrust the ship forward, forcing her to land with a violent explosion of water and sand, as it crept slowly forward onto the beach, until its momentum ceased to a halt, and silence took hold. A brief second of bewilderment passed, before action ensued, Pazrael leading the investigation party down to the shoreline. The ship's hull was shattered, the mainsail fractured and threatening to collapse. Yet no cries of help came, only the crazed sounds of men wailing. Without warning, a rope ladder flew out of the night and crashed into the side of the hull. Pazrael offered no time for anyone to descend as he grabbed the rope with both hands and began to climb aboard. On the deck, Pazrael nearly lost his footing as he gazed at the bedlam before him. Blood flowed freely from side to side, while pale and often dismembered corpses littered the decking around him. Those that still clung to life hugged the corners and recesses of the ship, praying, crying, wailing in an unknown tongue. As more men ascended the ladder, Pazrael stepped forward over the body of a presumed dead man. But this man, only half dead, the other half deranged, rolled onto his feet and stared upon his intruder with crazed, demonic eyes. Pazrael held out his arm.
Easy now, friend.
But the man launched himself, screaming at the height of his voice. Pazrael parried the man with ease, and the men that had now boarded quickly detained him. Drawing an arrow from his quiver, Pazrael aimed towards the man's chest. The arrow shone a deep blue. Instant death would be dealt from compassion.
What happened here?
But no sooner had Pazrael asked his question than the madman, slippery from blood and sweat, squirmed his way loose, forcing the men to knock him unconscious.
You won't get much sense from that lot, my bro.
Pazrael turned, his arrow searching for an unknown target. From within the darkness of the cabin, the speaker stepped into the night. The blue light reflected off the dwarf's tattooed forehead as it slowly changed color.
And who are you?
My name is Krumpet van Tonder,
said the dwarf, his lips barely moving behind his facial hair. The dwarf was clearly very proud of his well-kept blonde beard and mohawk, as much as he was the excessive amount of jewelry and tattoos that covered his body. They studied each other for a moment. Pazrael lowered his weapon upon seeing that Krumpet made no effort to retrieve the single-sided axe and shield that remained affixed to his back.
Are you with this crew?
Well, I'm with them, but I'm also not with them, if you know what I mean.
One of the men behind Pazrael stepped forward.
You're not Scottish? How comes you're not Scottish?
Krumpet became visibly angered by the remark.
Here we go, yeah, typical. One instance of a dwarf being Scottish and now we're suddenly all Scottish. I mean, think about it. You think of South Africa, you think of diamonds and mining. And what are dwarves known for? Mining. So why wouldn't a dwarf be South African?
Pazrael frowned at the dwarf's sudden and rather intense burst of anger and decided to quickly change the topic. Gesturing around himself, he said,
How come you're not affected?
Krumpet sighed and managed to somewhat compose himself.
I've been tracking this lot for some time. They left the desert after some kind of discovery, but they were all rather secretive about it. Wouldn't tell me what it was, you know? When I saw them boarding a ship, I sneaked on. Thought I could pester them the whole journey until I had my answers. I can be quite
Angry?
persuasive, if I need to be.
Did it work?
Well, no. This lot maddened by the second. Halfway through the crossing, they snapped. Started yelling at each other. Just arguing at first. Then fights broke out. Then violence followed. They were all too far gone for my questioning, and I had no use killing them either. After all, I don't know how to sail a ship, so... No, I just let them be, and tried to gather what information I could.
And what did you find?
Not what I needed, but enough.
And do we know what drove them mad?
Krumpet turned and paced a little, seemingly pondering whether he should divulge what little he knew. Eventually he said, "Let's take a walk, my brew." They left the wrecked ship and parted ways with the strangers that had congregated around it. Further down the beach now, alone under the pale moon, Krumpet stopped and turned to face Pazrael. His features portrayed a solemn mask, but Pazrael sensed the dwarf's eyes betrayed a deep fear within him. But there was no fear within Krumpet, only a burning desire. Have you ever heard of the fire that fell from the sky?
Yeah, I have indeed heard of these stories.
I believe it to be more than a rock. It's an evil that eats at people from the inside. I mean to find it, and I mean to destroy it.
Well, then we search for the same thing, Muffin.
Krumpet!
Sorry, tell me, Krumpet, how much do you know?
I'm not long for this realm. I can't really tell you much.
Ah, that's interesting. Me neither. I was brought here.
Ah, by the Smoke Man.
Yes, the Smoke Man indeed.
Aha! I guess his belief in us individually was not as strong as he made us believe, eh?
Then we should work together.
Agreed, my brew.
But not for destruction. We must fulfill the bargains we've made and deliver the tablet.
Okay. Agreed. Far to the west, across the barren sea, lay the jungle land of Ptolemysho. Two young men, hired help for a budding adventurer, followed in the footsteps of their employer. The jungle ahead, dense with tangled vine and shrubbery, thick with trees and vegetation, concealed all that lay before them. The air, barely breathable in its closeness, was as much alive with bugs as the jungle floor was with insects. The sound of gently moving water could be heard in the distance, a possible cause for the lingering mist that hovered low in the area. As machetes hacked a path forward, the men suddenly came across a clearing. The land before them now, blackened, scorched, and charred. In the middle of a depression that formed the center of the clearing lay a mound. The adventurer, fascinated by his discovery, briefly studied the surrounding area as he fell to his knees and began to hack at the mound. His helpers, initially puzzled by the man's frenzy, soon joined in. Something, it appeared, was calling to them, begging for release. Hours passed as machetes pummeled the ground, skin and fingernails ripped and tore. But eventually, a discovery was made. The adventurer reached in, cleared the loose soil away, and placed his hands around the object, lifting it high above him. Dirt and rubble fell from the stone tablet as the sun shone down upon them and burned their eyes. Curiosity between the men spilled over as they each asked to examine the stone tablet, to hold it. And upon the adventurer's denial, boiling points were reached. The men leapt for him, working together at first, but soon turning on each other. The three men tussled and fought in the heat of the midday sun, anger growing into hatred, hatred descending into violence. The tablet became a weapon for crushing bone, as much as the machetes did for tearing flesh. Eventually, only one man remained. On his knees, the remaining helper held a strange stone in his hands. It was broken and crumbled on one side. The blood from his hands, still warm, still fresh, flowed over the cold stone and activated an ancient power. Strange carvings of unknown origin and meaning began to emit a dull glow. The man rocked on his knees as whispers entered his mind. It called to him. It showed him visions of past and future, a prescience of horror, a sacred place.
I must go there. I have to find it. I must find it.
The bloodied man slowly began to rise on trembling knees, and with a tablet clutched firmly to his chest, he began his search. The passage from Calcutta to the desert city of Malaya was blessed with calm waters. A pleasantry that Krumpet was all too pleased with, having suffered from a prior intolerable crossing of madmen and stormy seas. Pazrael had paid handsomely for the haste in their departure, for this lead, as vague as the information was, remained the only glimmer of hope they had, the only path they could see toward retrieving the tablet. The horizon before them was a vista of golden sand under a deep blue sky. The city of Malaya emerged from the distance. But first they were greeted by the expansive bazaar of Azul. The small harbour was alive with activity, people boarding and departing boats at any given speeds, some perusing maps, some knowing where they were going. The sounds of the nearby ocean clashed with the sounds of the bazaar, and in the middle of it all lay a medley of multinational voices. The midday sun seared the concrete below, and the heat lingered between the bodies that crowded the port.
It sure is hot here,
remarked Pazrael as he waited to leave the vessel.
Oh, tell me about it, bro,
responded Krumpet, suffering, agitated. They walked slowly between the multicolored stalls and shacks that lined the sandy streets. The distinct smell of fresh fruit and seafood carried on the warm air with notes of citrus and salt. Exotic clothes and delicate carved wooden items littered the surroundings, each and every one shadowed by a smiling and eager seller. Colorful sheets of tarpaulin swayed gently in the breeze that brought with it the sweet smells of cooking, spices, and aromatic smoke. Small stone buildings became more prevalent as they traversed deeper into the chaos, one of which welcomed travelers for refreshments.
Let's try in here, Krumpet.
Krumpet moaned, clearly struggling with the heat. Inside the small stone building, the air was welcomingly cool. As their eyes adjusted to the shady darkness, it became clear that this establishment was used more for respite than intoxication. The occupants were few and far between, mostly one per table, and often in a state of rest or sleep. The barkeeper eyed the two irregular customers as they strolled toward her.
Welcome.
Hello.
What can I get for you two lovelies?
Pazrael placed his hand on the bar.
Water, please.
Ale, mumbled Krumpet. The barkeep turned to fix their drinks, her long curly hair twirling behind her as Pazrael and Krumpet shared a glance.
I haven't seen you two here before.
Haven't been here before,
Figures.
said the barkeep, turning again to face them and now presenting their drinks. Pazrael, without asking, placed several coins upon the counter.
Will this suffice?
You could just inquire as to the cost.
Pazrael remained silent. After an awkward pause, she said,
Yes, that will suffice.
Krumpet reached for his ale and promptly swallowed half the contents of his tankard.
We're looking for something,
said Pazrael, leaning forward.
And what might that be?
Krumpet finished his ale and wiped the remaining froth from his beard.
a dig site.
The barkeeper frowned as she studied the two men.
You've heard of it?
She's heard of it.
Yes, I have heard of it.
She's heard of it,
Krumpet repeated.
What can you tell us?
What do you want to know?
Everything, lady.
Please.
All I know are the rumours and whispers I hear. Folks that know folk, you know? Folk that tell of stories already told. Who knows if they're true or not?
What kind of stories?
Listen, all I know is that the place is deserted now. Everyone just vanished. They either didn't come back, or if they did, then they left shortly afterwards. And no one seems to care to know why. Sounds edgy if you know what I mean, and I don't want any part of it.
Do you know where it is?
You should talk to the camel guy. North of here, on the outskirts, he knows the area. You'll be needing his goods too if you're travelling that way anyway.
The camel guy?
Yeah, the camel guy. That's what everyone calls him.
Why do they call him the camel guy? The barkeeper shrugged.
Because he sells camels.
Pazrael briefly smiled as he finished his water and thanked the barkeep for her service. On the tattered outskirts of the Azul Bazaar, Pazrael and Krumpet eventually spied the small and somewhat in need of repair wooden fencing of the camel enclosure. Surrounding the panels stood a multitude of tall poles adorned with oversized flags and drapes of varying colors and designs. A mild wind, coupled with strong gusts, came rolling over the desert dunes and buffeted the area. An older man with greyed tie-back hair and a scruffy-looking beard approached them. He wore a dusted blue robe and held a cane to support his meager gait.
How can I be of assistance?
We wish to rent some camels from you, sir.
The old man grovelled something unintelligible. What did he say?
I'm not quite sure.
What did you say, old man? The old man, baffled by the question, repeated with some clarity.
We've got some for you. Big camels, little camels, all kind of camels.
We'll take 2 camels. We need 2.
I am assuming you are going into the desert.
We are.
And then you pay full price. Not many folk go into the desert and come back these days. If you come back, then I return half your money.
Sounds fair.
Does it? Pazrael glanced at his companion. He was beginning to see the humour in his ways.
We'll take those 2,
said Pazrael, pointing at what he thought looked like the 2 least likely to die in the next 5 minutes. Again, the old man grovelled something unintelligible as he walked away to gather the animals.
Oh, you think this one is very good? You don't know.
Hey, old man, you mentioned the desert. Why so fearful?
Hey, I am not fearful of the desert. I am fearful of what lies within it. Something is out there.
And what might that be?
The old man returned, leashes in his hands, camels on either side of him, and a bill of charge in his pocket.
Where did you say you are heading again?
Sounds like you already know, old man, said Krumpet, inspecting the bill.
The dig site.
Krumpet noticeably frowned at the price before handing the man his money.
Yeah, indeed.
The man hesitated while he scratched at his beard.
Well, it is your life, and you have already paid for the camels.
What do you know of this site?
A long, heavy sigh was released. One to dispel any guilt or sorrow for these men before leading them to their death. He pointed out towards the open expanse.
Just keep heading southwest from here. Should take you a couple days' journey with these beasts. You'll know when you are near. The smell of death will be in the air.
Pazrael and Krumpet collected the camels as the man turned to walk away.
Hey, what do you know of this site?
The old man said nothing.
Sir, can you tell us anything? What might we find there?
But the man continued to walk away. Under his breath, he whispered,
Only pain.
As the hours passed and the tiring sun fell swiftly to the horizon, Pazrael and Krumpet came across the crumbling ruins of an ancient place of worship. Almost perfectly square in its foundation, what remained of the walls barely reached head height. The frame arch that had once housed a wooden door remained almost untouched by time, as did the grooved pillars that surrounded the ruins. Their skin felt raw and dry from the desert heat. Their bodies ached from a full day of riding, and with the night drawing in, rest and fire were needed. Pazrael dismounted his camel.
Let's see out the night here.
Krumpet hopped down and began to inspect the area. Distant hills loomed on the horizon, but aside from a lone cactus or 2, they were alone.
I'll start the fire.
Good idea, Krumpet.
After gathering what they could, Krumpet began to assemble the fire within the limited grounds of the ruins. The roof was mostly missing and all sides were largely exposed to the elements, but at least it would offer them some cover. Pazrael looked up at the darkening sky as he tied the camels to nearby pillars. Low, heavy clouds were emerging over the hills.
Looks like a storm's drawing in, Krumpet.
Yeah, we better warm up quick then.
Indeed.
Pazrael sat with his back against the cold stone as he lay his bow and sais beside him.
So what's the deal with that thing then?
My bow? Huh. That's a long story.
Krumpet sat opposite, placing his effects down too, albeit with a more heavy-handed clanging.
Yeah, and it's a long night, isn't it?
The two stared at each other over the fire and flame, the warmth of which was already seeing off the coldness of the desert at night. A temperature shift that happened with remarkable haste.
Well, I was always exceptionally accurate with my longbow. I took it everywhere I went from a young age. I even keep spare parts in my satchel, in case I need to make another. Anyway, the quiver was blessed. My wife, she was a sorcerer, and she gifted me with her sorcery. The quiver spawns arrows. It never runs out.
And all the pretty colours though?
Yes. I'm not sure if that was part of her plan or just a mysterious side effect. I have learned they seem to glow depending on my mood, and the subsequent effects they have upon impact. They deliver the same emotion. You know, red for hatred and pain, blue for instant death. Yellow seems to arrive when I am panicked or wounded. Makes them terribly unreliable.
Huh, sounds fun. And where is this loved one now?
She's no longer of this world, Krumpet.
I'm sorry for your loss, Pazrael. A moment of silence passed before Pazrael continued.
I came home one day to find our home had been broken into. They took all they wanted, including her, and she was slain by darkness. And it has become my sole driving force in expelling any evil I come across, in whatever form it takes.
A stillness filled the air as the first flash of faraway lightning briefly lit the desert. The gentle rumble of distant thunder followed.
Do you know who it was?
I heard the screams of a neighbour soon after. 2 crazed barbarians. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was, but they were savages, almost frothing at the mouth, possessed by something. Needless to say, they got what they deserved.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm sorry to hear about that, my bro.
Yeah, a long time ago now, Krumpet. As for these sais, well, that's another story for another time. What about you? What brought you to this realm?
Krumpet sat upright as another bolt, closer now, lit the sky. He liked a tale as much as the next dwarf, but this one pained him.
I too have a horror story, Pazrael. I have taken an oath of vengeance to punish the wicked. A vigilante, you could say. Much like yourself. You see, I lost someone. Someone that the smoke man told me he would bring back. When I was younger, my family, they were murdered. They were murdered by bloody orcs. Evil bastards they are. Our entire village gone. I survived only because my grandmother, lowered me into a nearby mining well. I don't know how long I was in there before I was rescued. But when I was, I knew what I had to do. I learned to fight, learned to kill, learned to hunt those that deserve to be hunted.
Krumpet absently toyed with an amulet attached to his belt loop, a red ruby in the center of 4 shards of lightning, each arcing outward.
When I proved myself worthy in combat and righteous of intent, my strength grew, and I developed abilities. My axe, my anger. During a fight, I can become possessed with some divine power.
Suddenly above, the clouds burst as a multitude of forked lightning hit the ground nearby. The thunder, almost instantaneous, was deafening.
That's interesting. Do you know where your power comes from?
He's known as Gord, the Storm Lord.
After a moment, Pazrael said,
A hunter of those deserving to be hunted. Almost as if we were brought together, wouldn't you say?
The universe works in wondrous ways.
Yeah. And so too does the Smoke Man, I presume.
We should rest. Another full day ahead of us tomorrow. Pazrael nodded as Krumpet made himself comfortable. He lay, waiting for the rain to pour. But strangely, it never came. As dawn broke, Pazrael and Krumpet left the crumbling ruin that had offered them shelter throughout the night and continued their journey through the desert. Hours passed like days under the intense sun, and their quench for thirst grew stronger with each passing minute. When they arrived at the dig site, they were shocked to see how extensive it was. Structures had been erected on all sides, hiding the horror that lay at the center. The old man's words had held true. The smell of death greeted them and hung in the air like a low fog. Every tent, awning, or canopy sheltered a long-deceased body, decomposing in the heat and partly eaten by scavenging birds. Those that had not been so lucky as to die from mortal wounds or starvation had been strung up, the corpses gently swaying in the breeze. But none of this prepared them for what they would soon find. As they strode through the remaining bedlam, the structures gave way to a huge circular opening. Within the opening lay an ancient crater, and within that crater lay 100 bodies or more. Blood had covered the sand, saturated it, and then dried in the heat some time ago. Strangely, an eerie wind whisked around the crater as if circling the dead, picking up the red-stained sand and swirling it outward. Mighty God, expelled Krumpet, shocked by the sight before him.
What happened here?
Leaving their camels behind, carefully they stepped over and in between the dead as they made their way toward the center.
Something is strange.
You don't say.
No, I mean, the bodies. They're all reaching for something. Even in their final breath, they strived for the center, craving something. Overpowering desire.
Krumpet accidentally stepped on an arm and briefly lost his footing as the rotten flesh slipped away from bone. Oh, for God's sake! Unnoticed behind them now, as the flesh continued to fall away from the arm, a finger twitched.
So who is this cord you speak of, Krumpet?
Good. Krumpet absent-mindedly reached for the ruby amulet affixed to his belt. He's the storm god, and the lord of thunder. He revels in strength and prowess on the battlefield. Much like myself, said Krumpet, as he flexed one of his muscular arms. But Pazrael was now too distracted to answer, for they had reached the center of the crater, and in the middle of all the bodies, surrounded by outreaching hands, lay a partially buried object. Krumpet knelt beside the mound of sand and dirt that partially covered the tablet half. Look. What is it?
Don't touch it, Krumpet. Try your best not to even look at it. We must find water.
Water? Krumpet frowned at the initial change of topic, but quickly appreciated the idea. Yeah, good idea, bro. I'm beyond thirsty myself, eh?
The water suppresses dark magic and weakens it.
Ah, I see, said Krumpet disappointedly. And after a short search amidst the tattered sheltering, Pazrael found a small, sealable container.
I've got one!
He exclaimed, emerging sweaty from a nearby tent. Ah, I found water, responded Krumpet, as he bent down to splash the cool liquid over his face.
You mustn't drink that, Krumpet.
Only a sip.
That water has been sat there for untold days, possibly tainted with blood, poison, or worse. Drink at your own peril, my friend.
Krumpet, grumbling to himself, felt mixed emotions.
The initial frustration of being unable to quench his thirst was quickly transcended by Pazrael calling him friend. It had been some time since he had heard that word.
Pour it in here,
said Pazrael, holding out the container. Krumpet obliged, and they made their way back to the center of the crater. Unknown to them, dead, bloodshot eyes absently followed their every move. After several attempts to retrieve the buried tablet, Krumpet eventually gave way to frustration and dispersed the loose sand and soil with his hands. Quickly, he grabbed the tablet and placed it within the container. As he did so, a strange, distant, almost inaudible laughter could be heard.
Huh? Did you hear that?
I did,
said Pazrael, placing the lid on the container and sealing it shut. The dig site suddenly took on an unearthly air, as if a dark presence was now with them, looming, foreboding. The desert fell silent as the souls of 100 dead men wrapped around them, hauntingly close, and with an energy so powerful it could almost be touched. Warning them, maybe. Or were they reaching for a desire still coveted from beyond the grave?
I can feel its presence. I can hear it.
Yeah, so can I. Whatever this is, it possesses great evil. Are you strong enough to resist its call, Krumpet?
Of course I bloody can, bro. Can you?
Pazrael, finding the dwarf's low boiling point amusing, smiled and let out a slight chuckle as he nudged the dwarf playfully.
Come on then. We must go to...
But Pazrael's sentence fell away as his stomach filled with dread. The power of the tablet had consumed these men, driven them to madness, driven them to violence, and ultimately it had indirectly killed them all. Now, in their deceased state, the power still ran through their broken corpses. Venom still coursed its way through decomposing veins, and hatred still filled their blackened hearts. Cracked heads lifted. Broken hands and arms tried to gain purchase on the ground as the bodies around them began to rise.
Shit. Krumpet, we must leave now.
Come on, me too. You undead fuck.
Krumpet circled, looking for a path, but in every direction they were surrounded. They stood at the center of 100 rising bodies. Their eyes, even in death, radiated a deadly determination. Their fight for dominance was not done. Their strive for the tablet held one final attempt.
Which bloody way? Just go!
Krumpet swung his axe back and forth at varying speeds and angles as he rushed through the crowd, taking down several bodies with every blurred arc of cold steel. Pazrael, not as effective with multiple opponents up close, followed in his footsteps, able to take down those rising before him at range as arrows flew over Krumpet's shoulders. The undead were slow, weak, and hardly a threat to the experienced warriors, until they had almost reached the end of the circle. There rose a giant, much bigger than the others. At least 7 foot tall and not as far gone. He must have been the last to die. As Krumpet rushed forward, the giant began to bat away bodies in the vicinity, preparing for battle, gaining room for removal. An orange arrow flew over Krumpet's shoulder and embedded itself in the giant's eye. The giant stumbled backwards as Krumpet lunged, jumping high and bringing his axe down hard into the giant's chest with a sputter of foul and blackened blood. Nothing would stop them, at least nothing of this level. They did not turn back to assess the chaos and destruction they had caused, for around them, other bodies were beginning to rise, slowly walking out from behind shelter or emerging from the darkness of open tents.
Let's get the hell out of here, my bro,
said Krumpet, panting slightly.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me twice.
As they left the dig site, the words of the camel guy ran through Pazrael's mind. Looking behind them, the site lay still once more, as if the dead had finally given up. their power fading as the tablet gained distance with every step the camels took. This was a minor challenge against a weakened foe. What threats still lay out there beyond the horizon? He pondered the enemy they were yet to face. Situated on the outskirts of the Mosian jungle lay a small town known to its residents as the Haven of Qatar. A local man aimlessly wandered the muddy streets, desperately clutching an object close to his chest. His skin pale and unwashed, his clothes dirty and torn. Passers-by stared at him, crossed the street to avoid him, as they muttered between themselves. The man listened intently, his eyes darting from one location to the next, but they searched for nothing. They focused on nothing. He could feel the presence of the tablet. It begged at him as he closed his grip tighter. Desires spread through him like wildfire. He wanted to do things, bad things, but he held off, desperately clutching on to the man he once was, the good citizen he used to be, the normal man he used to be. Reaching his abode, the man entered, rushed to a nearby loose floor panel, and stashed the tablet underneath before retreating to his usual corner where he sat, rocking in the shadows. Days had passed since he had found it, since he had murdered his friend and that poor adventurer in cold blood. He had drunk himself into a stupor on multiple occasions since then. The empty bottle surrounded him now, littered throughout his home. It had helped him forget, but it did not diminish the sorrow, the guilt, the pain. Visions kept returning, so fresh in his mind, so visceral, he could almost touch them. He reached for his friend, wanting to show affection, wanting to apologize for his actions. But his friend's face turned red with blood. Eyes rolled up into his head as his skin blistered and fell away. The man whimpered as the visions faded, and he hugged his knees closer as he rocked. And then the voices came. The voices, too strong, too loud, could not be ignored. His strength diminished, his will broken. The man leapt for the floorboard, prying at it, fingernails bending backward and breaking, skin ripping. He grabbed at the tablet and rushed for the door. Dusk was setting in as the man walked on autopilot, the tablet guiding him through the town, over muddy paths and onto cobblestone roads, and eventually into the shadow of a local church. The tablet pulled at him, wanting to continue. The harbor was close by, and he could sense that that was its desired location. But somehow, he managed to resist. He opened the door. The bolt clattered loudly as it dropped, and he stepped through into the cooler interior. "Hello, my son," said a voice from the shadows. The man said nothing as he continued to walk forward toward the altar. Candles lined the walls inside the church. Several had been placed on and around the altar itself. The flames danced upon the man's face, exposing deranged contortions. A priest came into focus before him. "Are you okay, child?" The man, his body shaking from fatigue and sleep deprivation, slowly raised his eyes to meet the priest's.
I need...
The priest caught sight of the clutched object in the man's hands.
"The tablet,"
he whispered.
"Help me."
The priest stepped forward, closer to the man.
"I expected someone to come. I knew it would be me."
This story has been passed down through the ages, from priest to priest. The prophecy of the inevitable reuniting of the tablet.
The man clutched tighter as the priest circled him and pointed up toward a large stained glass window.
You see, these images within the glass depict a story. Follow them. Follow them through, my child. Follow them through to destruction.
With this, the man stepped back, almost unwillingly.
No.
The priest turned to face him.
Give it to me now, son. I can take this burden from you.
The man moved his head, neither a shake nor a nod. The priest stepped forward again, seeing the torment in the man's eyes.
I can see your pain.
No,
said the man, stepping backward, visibly shaking now.
Give it to me. It must be destroyed.
The priest reached for the tablet and tried to prise it from the man's grip, but the man became visibly angered, his jaw clenching wildly, teeth showing.
no.
He said, this time with more depth in his voice than one would deem possible. But the priest would not let go, for it was his duty to do so. With as much strength as the frail man could muster, he flung his fist forward and caught the priest on the chin. The priest stumbled backwards in pain as the man turned and ran through the open door and out once more into the darkness. Almost a month had passed since Pazrael and Krumpet had left the horror of the dig site. The heat of the desert now seemed like a distant memory as the cold, relentless rain poured down upon them. The restless sea had rocked the merchant ship from side to side with swift rises and violent falls. But now the waves were beginning to calm. The ocean took on a sheen of placidity as the waves fell quiet and the air began to clear. Pazrael emerged from the rear quarters, holding an empty bottle. He found Krumpet bent over the side railing and presumed that seasickness had finally taken him.
There's never enough grog for these long voyages, is there, Krumpet?
Krumpet said nothing. He just stared intently at the sea below.
Are you okay, Crumbs? Not feeling poorly, are you?
Pazrael noted that several of the crew were presently staring at them.
Look there! Do you see it?
Said Krumpet, desperately searching for an unknown entity.
What's that?
Said Pazrael, not diverting his eyes from the crew members.
Some bloody creature is what it is, lurking down there in the deep, probably following us. How long do we have left on this blasted vessel?
The crewmen seemed agitated, restless. The storm may have passed, but now the ship threatened to explode into chaos at any given minute.
It might be less time than you think.
Krumpet turned to face his friend, and as he did so, the sea creature showed its head and spat a ripple of seawater that narrowly missed Krumpet's face.
Ah! Blasted thing!
Yeah, I'd rather you focus more on what's happening on board this ship than overboard, Crumbs.
What's that now? Do we have trouble?
Yeah, very possibly. I believe the proximity of this tablet has grown too much for them. Suppressed or not, its power has reached them.
Let's take them. We can take them. I'll get right to it.
Yeah, and who would sail the ship, Krumpet? Just stay calm. We're nearly at port. We can...
The crewmen had reached their limit. The calling had grated upon them, teased them, clawed away at them from the moment these two travelers had bargained their voyage and stepped onto their ship. How dare they bring this sorcery on board? How dare they keep their secrets? How dare they not divulge whatever treasures they held so precious to them? The calling was too much of a temptation, too much of a burden. Why should they remain on the other side of this secret, on board their own ship? The audacity of these men. The cost of passage now seemed irrelevant. The crew deserved to know. The crew deserved to share. And the crew would choose the fate of their unwanted guests. The dark grey clouds that spewed and tormented the waves below had passed. But now, a second coming had appeared, chasing after the initial storm. The waves grew gradually, as once again, the rain began to fall. On the deck of the now listing ship, Pazrael and Krumpet stood firm, hands close to weapons, as 4 men approached.
Me and the boys been thinking.
Have you now, eh? Yeah, and we're thinking. We want to looking at what it is you've been holding.
We have paid for our passage here. Land is on the horizon. There's no need for trouble.
The only trouble here is you not doing what we ask. Give us the bag.
I won't do that.
Nah, we won't do that. Well, then it looks like we've got some trouble after all, don't it?
There is nothing special for you here. Nothing is to be gained from this.
Well, why can't we be seeing it then? Why all the secrets? Some have been hearing you speak of a tablet in the corners of the ship.
It's for your own safety.
And what about your safety?
As the crewmen slowly stepped forward, Krumpet's agitated state increased, his temper threatening to boil over. His axe now gripped tightly in his palm, he stood poised for action.
Please, we are merely transferring a dangerous item from one location to another. There's nothing of importance here. No treasure, nothing to be gained, only temptation.
Well, maybe we be wanting some temptation.
Just back away, brute!
Krumpet scowled. The crewmen reciprocated.
Just give me the fucking bag, little man.
No, you must.
Give it to me!
Shouted the nearest crewman as he reached out an arm to grab the bag from Pazrael. Krumpet reacted with blinding speed as a shining arc of metal swung through the air, his axe severing the man's hand with ease. The crewman screamed in agony and fell backwards as he clutched at his bloody stump that was once a forearm. Warm blood spurted into the air and fell amidst the cold rain. The close quarters left no room for a bow, and so Pazrael reached for his sais, lifting them just in time to catch the descending blade of one of the crewmen. He thrust his weight forward and pushed the man back. Krumpet stepped in front of his friend and lifted his shield high, his axe ready to swing.
Come here, fuckers.
Now the remaining crewmen circled, with Pazrael and Krumpet in the center. The wails and cries of the 4th crew member continued in the background as he picked up his arm and called for vengeance. More crewmen began to emerge from the ship's underbelly, faces of intrigue, frowns of confusion. Some of them demanding to know what was happening, others fueled by the pain their colleague was in. The crowd quickly grew around them. All the while Pazrael and Krumpet, now back to back, never took their eyes from the immediate threat. Pazrael weighed their options. The railing was close, they could both jump, but the sea below was just as violent. There was still some distance to the shore, and Krumpet had already spotted a less than friendly-looking creature lurking in the depths.
It doesn't have to be like this.
What the hell is going on here?
Said a man that appeared to have more stature than the others, stood taller than the rest.
We're being attacked is what's bloody happening. Back away from them now! Stand down, men!
And as most of his men fell away, still the 3 remained.
I gave an order. But they... Look what they did, Captain!
The crewmen pointed to their newly dismembered friend. The rain fell heavy now, as the captain stepped between his passengers and his disobedient crew members.
I said, stand down,
repeated the captain. The men obeyed, and the captain turned to face the travelers. Pazrael and Krumpet remained vigilant, but silent as the captain spoke.
I don't know what happened here, and I don't much care to know who started it. But as far as I'm concerned, you've paid for safe passage on my ship, and that is what I offer you.
He turned to cast an eye over his men, paying particular attention to the wounded.
But as soon as we land, I offer you these words of warning. I won't control these men when we set foot on terra firma. So I suggest that when we do, you put some distance between yourselves and me men. Savvy?
Indeed, we will,
said Pazrael. Krumpet nodded in agreement.
Thank you for your honor, Captain.
Just keep yourselves to yourselves until then.
The captain turned with finesse and made his way back to his cabin, his men parting with fear and reverence. Pazrael and Krumpet returned the stares of hatred and confusion with indifference, as they waited patiently for land to arrive. As the green and humid land of Ptolemesho approached, the storm finally erupted overhead. The crew were on autopilot, an organized chaos of barking orders and laborious procedures to prepare the ship for berth. She slowed gently as they approached the jetty, the helmsman working hard to maintain control against the growing waves. Pazrael and Krumpet stood alert and ready to depart at the earliest sign.
I feel like the rain follows you around, you know.
Pazrael glanced down at the dwarf.
Very possibly, Crumbs.
Krumpet stirred, clearly desiring conversation to dispel the growing anxiety.
So why did we charter this ship anyway?
Because it was the only one travelling to Ptolemesho.
Did you notice the ship was called Unsinkable 2?
Yeah, I did. Why?
Well, makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, what happened to the first one?
As the ship came alongside the quay and the gangplank was successfully affixed to firm ground, Pazrael and Krumpet wasted no time in being the first to traverse the rickety wooden board and depart the vessel. A brief look back confirmed the sensation that Pazrael felt as the eyes of a small crowd of crew members burned into him, their expressions filled with malicious intent. Hustling their way through the local populace of the small port, Pazrael and Krumpet found themselves quickly emerging into the cobblestone roads of a quaint little town. The larger-sized stone buildings of the quayside gave way to smaller, detached abodes and shops.
The haven of Qatar,
said Pazrael, matter-of-factly. Krumpet held his shield above his head to cover himself from the pouring rain.
Not much going for it, has it?
Pazrael shrugged.
I don't know. Seems nice. Quiet.
With dusk setting in over the jungle lands of Ptolemesho, the enticing lights and sounds of a local bar attracted Krumpet's attention.
What's our plan, Paz?
We need to find a place to rest, Crumbs, and to get out of this damn rain. We can continue our search tomorrow when the town comes back to life. Hopefully people will be more...
Yeah, that's a good idea, bro. But after that little trip of ours, I reckon I could settle for a few beverages tonight before turning in, eh? What do you say?
Pazrael glanced back in the direction of the port. The crowd was thinning fast as people fled to take shelter from the storm. But amidst the frantic movement, something seemed odd, out of place. A collection of shadows that hugged the walls and moved with an entirely different pace.
Yes, why not, Krumpet? Let's have ourselves a drink.
Inside the tavern, the atmosphere was fueled by excited tales of the sea. A continuous chime of tankards clinking and spilling their contents filled the background as journeys on the open sea and adventures upon the restless waves were shared. In the far corner, a man with a tremendous beard roared his own personal yarn, as flirtatious women, showing far too much skin, draped over his shoulders. Pazrael and Krumpet took in the ambience, ordered themselves an ale, and sat with their backs against the wall.
Now that's the sort of man I admire. Look at him. Look at the audience he has. Filled with respect and admiration, that lot. And look at those ladies too. Patting his hands, I bet.
Pazrael smiled faintly, but said nothing, his eyes never straying too far from the entrance.
That should be us, telling our tales over there, eh, Paz?
I'm more the quiet kind myself. Never felt the need to be the centre of attention.
Krumpet noticed the slump in his friend's demeanour.
Huh? What's wrong with you? You don't seem yourself.
Did you not see the shadows behind us? I think we're being followed, and I'm pretty sure I know who by.
Is that why you haven't taken your eyes off the door then?
Indeed. Let's just buy ourselves some time here. And try not to drink too much, in case we need to...
Krumpet bellowed with laughter.
Me? Drink too much? You don't know me well enough, my friend. There's not enough drink in one place for me to have too much. You know one thing I can tell you though, my bro. Whatever happens, I've got your back.
Pazrael finally dropped his gaze and turned to face his newly found friend. And with a genuine smile stretched across his face, he was about to reciprocate his loyalty when a single word struck his ear, almost as if the world around him had fallen silent for that one split second so that it may be heard. Now, Pazrael's attention lay solely upon the distressed preacher across from them. As he made his way over to the man, Krumpet followed, puzzled and bewildered.
"Excuse me, sir,"
said Pazrael, as unthreateningly as he could muster. The priest turned to face him.
Huh? Can I help you, son?
"I hope you can, Father. I couldn't help but overhear. You mentioned a tablet."
The priest chuckled to himself.
Yes, I did indeed. I was just talking to my companion here who, seems to have fallen asleep. Or maybe he has been asleep for some time now. Who knows?
Krumpet gently nudged the sleeping man, who promptly fell out of his chair and slumped down onto the ground. He shrugged and sat down on the recently vacated seat.
And what can you tell us about this tablet, good sir?
The priest eyed the newcomers with a paranoid curiosity, but the volume of alcohol he had consumed helped alleviate his worries. As Pazrael pulled up another chair, the priest retold his story of the crazed man that had recently entered his church. Nestled within the quiet rain-soaked cobblestone streets of the haven of Qatar lay the Sunderwolf Inn, a popular drinking establishment favored by sailors and local townspeople alike. Pazrael and Krumpet, having overheard a tale of a crazed man, and more importantly of a strange stone tablet, interrupted the storyteller and sat down at his table. They listened intently as the priest told them of the night's events, of how the man had entered his church, how he had seemed torn between two callings. The human soul that the priest saw behind the man's eyes seemed to be pleading, calling for help, wanting to alleviate the burden of the tablet. But some possessive force or unseen entity was clawing at him, pulling him away and forcing him to leave. Pazrael leaned forward.
"Tell me, Father, do you know the whereabouts of this man?"
The priest fell silent. Suddenly, he seemed crestfallen. Eventually, he sighed and said,
"Oh, yes, I'm afraid I do. I realized that I recognized him. It's a small town, you see."
Yeah, we understand, sir. But can you tell us where he is, though?
You won't harm him, will you? He seems entirely innocent. I believe him to be possessed, or worse.
"Nothing will happen to him, Father. We only want to help relieve him of the tablet."
The priest lifted his head, his eyes wide open.
"It must be destroyed. You will destroy it, won't you?"
Pazrael shared a glance with Krumpet before telling their side of the story. Under the table, he clutched tightly at the bag, holding the container that concealed the other half of the tablet.
"We are on a quest, Father. We mean to collect both parts of this tablet and vanish them from this realm."
And with that, the priest suddenly regained his composure as a fresh wave of adrenaline relinquished him from his drunken grogginess. He rose from his chair as he spoke.
"Then we must hurry. Quickly, before this god-forsaken tablet can do any more harm."
Krumpet, slightly miffed that he had not had a chance to finish his ale, jumped up and began to follow the priest, who was now moving with some pace toward the exit.
Where are we going now, eh?
"We must reach the church. I can explain all to you there."
Pazrael opened the door and departed the tavern. He was greeted by the coldness of the relentless rain and a paranoia of frosty eyes upon him. The priest pushed forward, eager to reach the church. Krumpet followed with haste, but turned briefly to face his friend. Pazrael was behind him, but so too were a dozen men, armed with wooden planks and cutlasses.
Oh, for God's sake! Behind you, Paz!
Pazrael dropped his shoulders with expected trepidation as he turned to confront the familiar faces.
And where do you think you two lovers are going?
Said one of the crew members from the Unsinkable 2. Another joined in.
Yeah, we got us a debt that needs paying, haven't we, lads?
Several of the men started chuckling. Pazrael counted 6 in total. The rain fell heavily as the two sides faced each other. The priest, not knowing what this was about, chose to stay out of sight, hidden in the shadows of a nearby alleyway.
Ugh. Listen, I'll give you lot one last chance to run away back to your little ship before you get seriously hurt.
But the men said nothing, lifting their weapons as they stepped forward. Pazrael sighed and reached for an arrow. For some reason, it shone blue. He realized then that these men were not savages. They were driven to this madness by their close proximity to the tablet. It had affected them slowly but surely upon their voyage from Calcutta to Tulamisho, and it had resulted in a scuffle that had seen one of their friends have his arms severed. This vengeance, although justified in their eyes, would surely still be under the enforced influence of the tablet. The blue arrows would deal a quick, compassionate death if needed.
We don't need to do this,
said Pazrael as he lifted his bow, the glowing blue arrow poised for release. A crew member pointed his cutlass at Pazrael.
Ain't your choice to be making, mate.
Pazrael sighed as he prepared to fire the arrow, but suddenly a blur of anger and violence was unleashed before him. Krumpet, it seemed, had had enough, and upon activating some inner power, he rushed upon the men with a speed Pazrael had not seen before. The crewmen immediately became distressed, scattering out of formation in panic and chaos. Cutlasses lashed out at the dwarf, but his axe and shield deflected every blow. Brilliant flashes of light flew in every direction with every impact. Krumpet's armory, when used with extreme smite, expelled an anger and fury forged from the Stormlord himself. Blood began to spray onto the cobblestone streets and flowed with the rainwater down towards the shaking priest. Cries of anger were quickly replaced with cries of pain as Krumpet's steel swung and arced through the air with blurring speed. Pazrael stood motionless in bewilderment and awe and lowered his bow. There was simply no need to use it. For within a matter of seconds, it was all over. The men, none mortally injured, yet all in severe pain and agony, picked themselves up and fled the violence. Now Krumpet stood alone, bloodied axe in one hand, bloodied shield in the other, as his breathing slowly returned to a normal pace.
Focus.
Pazrael offered the dwarf some time to calm before he asked,
So are you okay there, pal?
Krumpet turned. His expression was one of complete calm. One that had only recently replaced something else entirely.
Well, I was just bloody sick of that lot, you know. And I don't think we'll be seeing them again either, eh?
No, I don't believe we will, Krumpet. I'm glad they all managed to walk away, although a few of them probably wish they hadn't.
Come on, my brew. Let's find that church,
said Krumpet as he began to walk in the direction they had originally started in. The priest, now out of hiding, rushed over to Pazrael and whispered,
The dwarf! Is he okay? Safe, I mean.
Pazrael laughed and followed after his friend.
You know, I honestly can't tell for sure, but he's on our side at least.
As the rain began to ease off, and the cobblestone streets gave way to muddy roads, they found themselves at the gates of the old church. The jungle could be seen now, spreading out into the darkness, enticing yet dangerous, completely still yet full of life. Two slim shadows emerged from behind the building and darted across the road. The priest reacted instantly, shouting at them.
Ah! Get away from here, you thieves!
Is there a problem here?
Asked Krumpet. The priest responded quickly, not wanting any more violence.
No, they won't harm anyone. We have a problem with thievery around here. Those pesky elves. Anyway, it's nothing to worry about, son,
he said as he opened up the large wooden doors, and the trio entered the cold stone building. Inside, the smell of damp stone and stale candle smoke mixed with a faint musty smell of old books. The priest wasted no time lighting several candles around the altar before disappearing into an unseen room to collect some items. Pazrael and Krumpet took in the surroundings. It was small enough, but somehow appeared grandeur in its height and decoration. The large stained glass window added color and beauty to the dull stone walls.
Ah, here it is,
said the priest upon his return. He placed an enormous leather-bound book upon the altar and opened it up to a specific and recently marked section.
You see here, these paragraphs refer to the ancient scrolls that were discovered during the Dark Times, when evil freely wandered throughout the mortal planes, searching for something.
Searching for what?
I believe that they were looking for the tablet. You see here.
The priest pointed towards several depictions of battle, man and beast engaged in mortal combat.
My fellow brothers from the Holy Order battled with them to save our souls, all of our souls, and they banished the underworlds from this plane.
Pazrael studied the drawings. The men, all wielding glorious shining weapons, were dressed in brilliant white robes fastened to their bodies with immaculate-looking armor, a uniform for the gods.
How did they achieve this?
That knowledge is sacred to the Order, my child. Rest assured, if you fail in your quest, they will return.
I would question why they are not here already. If you believe this plane to be free from evil, then you are mistaken. I've had many battles with these beasts.
Lesser devils, maybe, but these creatures are something entirely different. Still, if you have already confronted these beings, then, well, it would take a summoning for them to return, or...
Or what?
Or, if they were to find the tablet, it is said it could harness an unknown power. Look!
The priest pointed up to the glass window.
It must be destroyed. I thought it was me, but I see now it is you, both of you. You have been chosen by a higher power. You must destroy it. You must destroy the tablet.
Pazrael and Krumpet shared a glance. No words were spoken between them, but it was in that very instance that they both agreed. They would play out this charade for the Smoke Man, but they both now accepted that the tablet must be destroyed, no matter what the cost.
We will destroy it, Father. I can promise you that.
But we must find it first, and then we will banish it from this realm. The destruction will surely follow afterwards. Father, we plan to enter the 9 hells.
The priest staggered.
Baator?
Yes, and we will destroy it in the very fires we believe created it. Somehow.
Oh, my children, if you are to undertake such a journey, you will surely... Hold on, please.
The priest scuffled away and disappeared once more. This time, he returned with larger items. He handed them to the willing adventurers.
Here, please. Take these.
Pazrael and Krumpet accepted the large garments and studied them curiously. Essentially, they were long, thick, crimson capes with a gold chain and fastening clips around the neckline.
The Cloak of Baator. They will offer you protection from all levels of the Inferno. They were gifted to me a long time ago by a mighty sorcerer once very close to me, but now sadly lost from this realm.
Thank you, Father. We will use them.
The priest laughed.
Oh, yes. You will indeed use them if you plan to survive. Down there it is harsh beyond compare. Extremely inhospitable to most beings. Here, you will need this too. It is a map.
Where does it lead to?
There is only one known entrance to the Nine Hells. This is it. The gate to Baator, hidden deep in the Razor's Edge.
Pazrael shook his head.
Father, you grace us with such blessings. We cannot repay you.
Your bravery is just, and your mission is holy. If you return, then you can give them back to me. If you do not, then God help us all. Give me your weapons.
Pazrael and Krumpet shared a curious glance, nervous at first to relinquish their weapons. But this man, this priest, was anything but sinister. They placed their weapons on the altar as the priest loomed over them. Slowly, carefully, he collected a small marble chalice and, dipping his fingers in the water contained within, gently splashed the liquid over the weapons as he recited a heavenly instruction.
Blessed are those with the might of the Lord. Blessed are those who defeat the wicked. Lift these weapons from their basal incarnate. Instill these weapons with a righteous gift. The power that comes from the Son, the power that comes from the God, the power that comes from the Almighty.
Upon completion, he turned to face his guests.
Those beasts down there, they are stronger than you can ever imagine, especially in their own environment. Your weapons normally would be useless against them, but now they are blessed with holy power.
Ah, right. Nice one, Father.
Yes, thank you, Father.
The priest sighed as he realized the gravity of this venture, the importance of this task. Things, it seemed, were far more serious than he had realized.
And now, you must know this man's whereabouts. He resides further down this street. When you reach the clock tower, turn left until you come across the hay bales. His residence is opposite. I believe you will know when you are near.
All right, let's be off then. Thanks again, good sir, and God bless you.
The priest frowned.
Cord?
Pazrael smiled.
Don't ask.
Indeed,
said the priest as he walked with them to the entrance of the church. Now, he offered them one last piece of advice.
I feel I must warn you that the tablet holds a disturbing evil. I felt it when the crazed man came to me, and I can feel it now too. I suspect you already have part of the tablet on your person, but I do not wish to know. No good can come from that thing.
Pazrael simply nodded as the priest continued.
You know that deception lies at the heart of all stories once evil is involved. I will pray to see you both again.
And with the priest's parting words lingering in their thoughts, weighing heavily in their minds, Pazrael and Krumpet left the church grounds and made their way down the long, muddy road in search of a crazed man. Deep into the night, as a cold layer of mist formed above the haven of Qatar and slowly descended down to envelope the town with a frosty glow, Pazrael and Krumpet, following the priest's directions, traversed the wet, muddy road past the old clock tower until they reached their destination. Across from a large expanse of land, scattered with hay bales, stood a row of wooden houses that seemed different from the town centre. They were old, decrepit-looking structures that Pazrael suspected had once formed the original settlement here. And as the priest had correctly informed them, they knew exactly which one of these properties was their intended location. One house before them now let out a dull orange glow, warming to the unknowing eye, but sinister to those informed. The orange light mingled with the moisture in the air and illuminated the mist, forming a halo of light around the house, and putting the structure itself into a dark, foreboding background. Strips of light could be seen in between the cracked wooden panels and holes in the thatching.
I guess this is it then,
said Krumpet matter-of-factly. Pazrael nodded.
It would appear so.
From inside the abode, a disturbance could be heard. Krumpet peeked through the window and saw a frail man, no more than a skeleton with a thin layer of flesh. He was backed into the far corner of the room, clutching a wooden plank and seemingly talking to himself.
Yup,
He looks crazy, alright. He's talking to...
Two silhouettes came into focus, their backs facing Krumpet as they slowly approached the frail man.
Elves!
What? Elves?
I think he's being robbed or something. He looks very distressed.
Krumpet turned to see that Pazrael was already at the door. With one swift movement, the ranger kicked it through, and in one step more, his bow was drawn and aimed at the elves. The crazed man wailed at him.
Help me! Help me!
What's happening here?
But as quickly as Pazrael had emerged, the elves had scarpered, fleeing the scene with an extremely light-footed speed. Krumpet barely even noticed them as they rushed past him and through the doorway. He spun around and swirled his axe for good measure.
What the bloody hell, brew?
He exclaimed. Pazrael gestured the dwarf.
Yeah, good one, Crumbs. You nearly got them.
Nah, never mind that, my friend,
said the dwarf, turning his attention to the now shaking man.
What's the deal here with this one?
The deranged man, dirty and covered in dried blood from self-inflicted wounds, simply stared up at them with a blank expression, neither happy to be saved nor scared to be confronted once more. He sat amidst the rubble and clutter of what was once a nice and tidy living room. In the darkened corner, still clutching the wooden panel in his arms, his eyes drifted down to the empty hole in the floor where the wooden panel used to be. Pazrael tried to calm the man down.
Are you okay? What did they want?
But the man recoiled.
No, leave me alone, please.
Krumpet slowly approached to closer inspect the hole.
What's down there?
But before Krumpet could see, the man leapt forward and covered the hole with his entire body. Krumpet reached for the man and picked him up with ease, pinning him against the wall.
Easy, Krumpet. Easy,
said Pazrael as he began to inspect the flooring. The man, groaning at first, gently began to weep with submission.
Oh, you mustn't. You can't have it. You won't.
Suddenly, the man's voice exuded power. A demonic tone flowed through his vocals, and with it, a rush of adrenaline and strength.
I won't let you. I won't let you,
he said, breaking free of Krumpet's hold and shoving the dwarf backwards. He raised the wooden plank over Pazrael's head, ready to bring it down with as much force as he could muster, but Pazrael was too fast for him. The ranger parried sideways, dodging the blow by inches, and regaining his footing with a sai already drawn in one hand.
Stop this,
he demanded. The man turned with hatred in his gaze. The orange light from the nearby candles reflected fire in his eyes, but that fire would once again be reduced to tears as another man's voice entered the room, a holy voice.
Stop this, my child. Please,
said the priest as he slowly walked between the hunters and toward the man.
You must give in to your will. Look to your soul, and you will find the Lord's answer.
The man fell to his knees, trembling, yet still poised for attack.
You are innocent, my son. Your body is being used by forces not of this world. I know you to be true. I know you to be righteous.
Now the man visibly fell apart as he dropped the wooden plank, and his body slumped into depression.
I have done terrible things, Father.
All your sins can be forgiven, child. You can confess them all to me. But first, you must relinquish the tablet.
The man shuddered. A primal instinct threatened to overpower him. An addiction to the tablet, to its calling. But this time, the good within his soul prevailed, and he cowered away, retreating back into the corner of the room. Slowly, carefully, Pazrael reached into the floor cavity and collected the stone tablet half. Upon its retrieval, a strange, distant laughter could be heard.
Huh? That bloody laughter again, eh?
Yeah. It sounds familiar somehow.
The priest hurried to the frail man, offering assistance as he spoke.
The devil's work.
This part looks different,
said Pazrael, studying the tablet. Residue of dried blood stained the surface and formed clumps within the depressions. The carvings seemed to emit a faint glow.
Looks like it's been activated or something. Here, you take this one, Krumpet.
The dwarf recoiled his head in shock.
What? Why do I have to take this one, bro?
Pazrael stood holding out his arms.
Because I've got this one. It's best not to keep them both together, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but...
Just take it, Crumbs.
Yeah, okay,
said Krumpet, taking the tablet with an angry-sounding muttering under his breath.
Dan moet ek mos maar seker die fucking ding vat, nee.
Are you okay here, Father?
Said Pazrael, casting a worried eye over the man. The priest looked up. Calmness flowed through his voice.
I will be okay here. I am sorry I followed you. I had a feeling my work was not yet done with this man.
No, please don't apologize. You de-escalated this situation far better than Krumpet or I would have.
The priest smiled.
And now, you too must go. Fulfill your quest, and Godspeed to the both of you.
Pazrael nodded, turned, and followed Krumpet outside.
We could use some rest, you know, Paz.
Pazrael let out a weary sigh.
I know, but I didn't much fancy staying in that house without the fear of having our throats cut in the middle of the night.
Yeah, my bro, for sure. I'd rather sleep outside anyway.
Yeah. Well, let's put some distance between us and the town before we rest. I don't know how far a reach this tablet has.
Yeah, agreed, my bro.
During their confrontation with the crazed man, the clouds had parted and a full moon now cast its milky glow upon the land. In the distance, over the dense, dark layer of trees, a range of towering black mountains could be seen rising from the jungle.
Huh, it's a good job we have the priest's map, eh?
Said Krumpet, pointing towards the mountains.
Yeah, although I dare say we never really needed it.
Oh, why do you say that?
Pazrael shrugged as they walked off the beaten path and towards the jungle.
Well, I believe we would have seen our mutual friend again. Don't you?
You mean the smoke man? You think he knows where the entrance would be?
I have a feeling he would have known exactly where such a gate would be.
Huh. We might have to watch ourselves from now on, you know, Paz.
Pazrael laughed and slapped his friend on the back.
I've been watching out for us since day one, my friend.
Come to me, my love. Pazrael! Come to me, Pazrael! Pazrael!
Pazrael awoke, startled and clutching his bow. The dream, so fresh, so clear, remained in his mind. The image of his wife, crestfallen and reaching for him, burned behind his eyes. He sighed as he relaxed, his head hung low, for he was not a stranger to dreams, but rarely ones of this nature, rarely ones so cruel. Could it be the tablet's power was beginning to wear down Pazrael's mental armor?
Bad dream, eh?
Said Krumpet. Pazrael looked up. The fire between them had died a long time ago, and the cold dew of the morning clung to everything around them.
Yeah.
They had been traveling for days now. The pleasant fields quickly turned into jungle, then deeper still. The jungle gave them no quarter, thick with vegetation and all but uncrossable sections. They had decided instead to follow the river verge as long as they could. Their pace was slow, but gradually they progressed. Eventually they crossed the river itself, and finally they escaped the green hell. Before them stretched the beginnings of the Sedna mountain range, and located at its center lay the treacherous summits of the highest peaks, known collectively as the Razor's Edge. They had made camp under the shelter of a large flat stone that ruptured from the earth like a knife's edge, forming a natural lean-to. The cloudless sky was a rich, deep blue, offering the sun plenty of time to warm the air. But the path before them rapidly increased into colder climates as the altitude parted the air and ice began to form. Collecting their effects, they wasted no time in traversing their chosen path. steep at first, but soon it veered into a steadier climb. As the hours passed and the air began to thin, the path became narrow, and now, as they turned a rock face, a deep and dangerous chasm exposed itself below.
Mighty God!
Yelled Krumpet, his voice filling the chasm. The response that he received was not expected, for it was not from Pazrael, but instead a blood-curdling cry that echoed through the mountain range. The call itself was more like a broken wolf's howl, and the reason it made Krumpet's blood boil was because he knew exactly what that cry was. He knew exactly what that cry came from, as he had heard it many times before. It had haunted his earliest memories when it had filled that old mining well.
Jeez, what the hell was that?
Questioned Pazrael. Krumpet turned just in time to see them approaching. He spoke with pure venom.
Orcs!
No sooner had Krumpet readied his axe and shield had the first javelin been launched toward them. The spear flew past Pazrael's head.
How many? How many of them?
Krumpet growled.
Enough! We must keep moving.
Pazrael and Krumpet continued on the ever-narrowing mountain ledge. Fortunately, the path slowly turned around to the left, leaving them in a blind spot. But the orcs were ruthless, fearless. They would run at full speed with complete disregard for the safety of themselves or their comrades. Bloodlust had taken over. The path began to crumble as the cold elements weakened the rocks, forcing the hunters to slow down. Another javelin flew past them and descended into the chasm below. Now, a war cry ripped through the air like thunder, the proximity alarmingly close.
Watch out!
Cried Krumpet, lifting his shield just in time. A penetrating thud followed as the javelin impacted and embedded itself into Krumpet's shield.
There, yeah!
Pazrael turned and fired an arrow. The red glow lit the mountainside as it traversed down the icy path. Another one followed, and then another. The orcs still approached, pushing past the dead and wounded, sending them toppling down to the depths. Krumpet fell silent. He stood deadly still, as if in meditation, as the arrows flew over his head. Vengeance filled inside his heart, and anger pumped it through his veins. He took on an otherworldly stare, as his entire body pulsed with some higher power. His grip tightened on his axe, as once again, sparks of energy began to course through the weapon and ripple across the metal surface. Pazrael's arrows flew with impressive speed, taking out one, then another, with deadly aim, each body falling to its grave with glowing red temple wounds. But still they came. The orcs, this savage mountain tribe, covered their greyish skin with roughly cut pieces of fur and armor. Their vicious, pig-like faces, scowling with bloodthirsty tusks, eager to slay anything before them. Krumpet waited until he could see the green of their eyes, before launching himself at full speed into the approaching army. He roared with the might of the Thunder God as he pounced forward. Unleashing a whirlwind of steel, his axe soon drenched in blood. His shield no longer used for protection, but more as a weapon of force. He drove through them, sending several bodies to their doom, as Pazrael's arrows continued to fly overhead. Flashes of brilliance emitted not only from Krumpet's weapon, but from the dwarf himself, as his anger gave no mercy to the limbs and bowels of his enemies. The white, icy path now covered and tainted with something else entirely.
Krumpet! There's too many of them! We must go!
Called Pazrael. Krumpet stopped and caught his breath. His action seemed faded even to him. Not quite a blackout, but more a rage-induced frenzy. The orcs around him, dead or dying. The path blocked, for now. Krumpet turned to follow Pazrael further up the path, but the path itself narrowed into single-file width, and they had barely reached the next turn before the orcs had trodden over their fallen and were already on them again. Krumpet groaned.
What do we do?
Keep going! Keep going, Krumpet!
It's too bloody slow. I'm going back.
But as Krumpet turned, he promptly lost his footing as the worn rocky ledge below him gave way. Pazrael reached for him.
Fuck's sake, Krumpet, it's too dangerous!
He said, firing another arrow to buy them some time. The leading orc recoiled as the arrow penetrated its forehead. But another soon replaced him, faster, stronger.
Hurry, Krumpet! Hurry!
But the orc was close. Too close. It clawed at the ledge for grip as it reached for its prey.
It's too late, Pazrael. You're already on us.
Keep going, Krumpet.
You go. Go on, my bro. I'll buy you some time, eh?
Krumpet, no!
But Krumpet had already turned to face the reaching orc, and as he did so, a howling wind, distant at first, but approaching with incredible speed, swept across the chasm and collided with the mountainside. The force of the impact ruptured the loose stone and sent out a shockwave that crumbled the path below them. And in an instant, the ledge, the orcs, were no more. Pazrael and Krumpet stood in silent shock, daring not to move, as the wind disappeared as fast as it had arrived. As it parted, much the same as when it had appeared, it was accompanied by a very audible and very sinister whispering. Eventually, as calmness befell them, Pazrael and Krumpet continued their climb. The Sedna Mountains offered no respite for the torturous climb. The snow, piercingly cold, had arrived soon after the orcs had mounted their ill-fated attack. Pazrael and Krumpet had not spoken of the whispering wind that had offered them salvation, for in their minds they were both fully aware that its presence was not a coincidence. The voice it had carried was by now not unfamiliar to them. The crumbling narrow ledge soon gave way to barren rock faces and unpaved trails as they approached the razor's edge. As the altitude increased, the air faded and breathtaking coldness took a firm grasp of their bodies. Now, the wind blew with such fury that the gentle snowfall transformed into a full-scale blizzard. The whiteout that followed doubled the feel of the elements and reduced visibility to all but a few meters. Pazrael reached into his satchel and retrieved the cloak gifted to him by the priest.
Krumpet!
He shouted. Krumpet barely heard the call over the howling wind. The dwarf's arms, crossed tightly over his chest in a desperate attempt to keep warm, were nearly frozen in place. Pazrael continued.
Your cloak! Put it on!
Krumpet had almost forgotten about the cloak, and retrieving the garment and placing it around his body, he attempted to smile, but the frozen muscles in his cheeks would not move. The cloak provided instant warmth, as a further layer of clothing would naturally do, but there was an intensity to its heat that was not just welcome to them, but one that also provided a warning that they were near. The cloak's powers already beginning to activate. As the hours grew longer and harder, travel became slow and laborious. Each step plowed through a foot of loose snow. Krumpet sighed as they passed another false peak along the perilously thin ridgeline. The razor's edge was living up to its name. But now, as the blizzard began to settle and the clouds began to part, they could finally see the summit, outlined against a brilliant blue sky. It was as if a divine power had showed them the way, for no more than an instant later, the clouds reformed and the whiteout continued. Still, they had their bearings. They had their path. But as they closed in on the highest point of the range, they came across a rare and unexpected plateau. And within a few meters more, sudden fear enveloped them both, as complete disorientation consumed them.
What's going on?
Standing on flat ground and surrounded by a thick white blanket of wind and snow, there was simply no way of telling which way was east, nor west.
Which way, my bro?
Shouted Krumpet.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Oh, for God's sake. I'm bloody freezing here, my bro.
As am I, Krumpet. As am I. Let's just keep walking. We must be.
But Pazrael's words fell away as he witnessed a strange and ominous glow appear in the far distance.
Look, Krumpet.
Huh? What the hell is that?
It's him, isn't it?
Who? You mean old Smokey?
Yeah, it must be. He saved us at that chasm. And he's saving us now.
Saving us? Is that what you think?
No. Look, I'm under no illusion that he is very likely playing us, but one thing is for sure. He wants this tablet, and he can't get it by himself, for whatever reason. That must be him. That must be the way we should go.
Yeah. I guess you're right, my bro.
Okay then, well, I'll follow you this time.
Huh? Why do I have to go first?
Because, you know, you can do the Axe Twirly thing that you do.
Jested Pazrael, and although partly smiling, Krumpet sighed as he turned to continue walking. The plateau was much larger than Pazrael had expected, and it took a further hour to reach the rising verge. All the while, the mysterious orange glow grew brighter, and as they finally approached the end, the mountain rose once more before them. But this time, only a short distance in front, and no more than a few meters above them, the orange glow grew its brightest, and then simply disappeared. Pazrael smiled.
Krumpet! Oh, we must be almost there.
Krumpet groaned with extreme displeasure. A groan that summed up his thoughts perfectly.
Fuck.
Why had he chosen to climb these monstrous mountains? The path before them took on a flattened trail with steep verges rising on either side, almost as if it had been carved by someone or something. And it didn't take long before they were finally confronted by what they sought. Before them now, carved deep into the rock face, stood an overwhelmingly large archway, protected on either side by even larger stone guardians. Their eyes, worryingly real, pierced down upon them. And within the multi-layered archway stood a flat, featureless stone door, the gateway to Baator. Krumpet, scratching at his frozen beard, looked up in awe.
You know, I've seen a place like this before. In the Outlands.
Pazrael stood beside him, admiring the gate as well, and also trying to figure out just how they were supposed to pass through it.
Yeah, well, we're not in that realm anymore, my friend.
As the wind howled around the mountain, Pazrael and Krumpet inspected the carved entrance. The door was solid, cold. It had no lock, no instructions, no markings of any kind. It simply stood there, ominous, overbearing, and somehow intimidating in its presence. Pazrael examined the perimeter.
There's nothing around the edges.
So, what now?
Said Krumpet, punching at the door a few times with increasing anger.
What are you doing?
The miserable weather grew increasingly colder, and now, stuck with a seemingly impassable door, tempers began to rise.
I don't know. Can't you use some of your dwarf vision or something?
Krumpet stared mockingly at the door.
Huh? Why? 'Cause it's stone? Nah, bro. We don't just look at something and figure out how to open it. Why don't you use all magic arrows?
Oh yeah, great idea.
Said Pazrael, pulling several arrows from his quiver and firing them at the door. Each arrow broke or bounced away pathetically.
But that's not going to work, is it? I can't fire a few arrows at the door and hope it opens up.
Well, I don't know, do I?
Krumpet now returned to punching and kicking at the door.
Use your bloody wisdom to figure it out, my bro.
Why don't you use your crazy strength or something to break it down?
Krumpet briefly considered the idea.
Well, I suppose I could try to smash it with my trusty axe. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I have a few times now.
Yeah, once when we got the tablet from the desert.
Yeah, and once again when we recovered the second part from the crazy man.
But it's him, isn't it? But what does it mean though?
Suddenly, the rock face emitted a deep rumble. The carved stone around the door began to crumble and crack. And the door itself, slowly, began to open. Instantly, a gust of thick, warm air escaped from within and rushed over them. The air was filled with the smell of death and rotten flesh, and carried on the wind the faint sound of tormented screams.
Here there.
Said Krumpet, holding his nose.
Well, I guess it means we can go in then.
Yep.
Ugh.
I guess so.
But the two hunters remained still at the entrance to the gate.
So, who's going first this time, my bro?
Well, I was thinking...
No way. I went first last time, my bro. It's definitely your turn now. You got all your fancy arrows, huh? You can use them if you need to.
Look, it's a bloody wide door. Let's just go in together. Agreed?
Aha. Yeah, my bro. Agreed.
Already wearing their empowered cloaks, Pazrael and Krumpet briefly checked and prepared their weapons before setting forth into the horror that awaited them. Slowly, carefully, they descended the dark, thin, cavernous passage into the heart of darkness. Their footsteps on the cold stone below echoed around them with every step. Their breath grew louder, and with every crumble of ancient rubble and stone beneath their feet, their hearts beat faster. Pazrael slipped and briefly lost his footing in the blackness, but managed to quickly regain his balance. Krumpet fared a little better with his dark vision, thanks to his natural-born dwarven abilities. Pazrael, pulling an arrow from his quiver and firing it, watched as the arrow shone a brilliant white that lit the surrounding walls as it descended an almost intraversible steepness. They took small sidesteps as their eyes adjusted after the blinding flash of the arrow. But for now, there was only pure blackness in every direction. An eerie silence broken only by the occasional whisper of the slightest breezes. The screams of pain and torment still carried on the wind. Suddenly, the flames of 100 torches puffed into existence, affixed to the walls on either side. They spread into the deep distance.
Reach the precipice. I will greet you there.
Krumpet recoiled, ready for action.
What the? Where is he? Huh?
He didn't appear. Are you still there?
But there was no response. After a moment of pause, they continued their descent. A further flicker of light came to life before them. The closer they stepped, the more apparent it became that the flicker was reddish-orange in color. It had to be fire. It had to be the guiding light that would lead them to the end of this cave. They continued, slowly, so as not to trip on any obstacles or hit their head on any low-hanging rock. When they reached the light, the entrance from which it emerged seemed small and shallow. Pazrael trailed his hand on the ground behind him until they finally reached the floor of the cave. Now, they had to get down on their hands and knees to crawl through the gap. And as they did so, they were hit with an intense level of heat. The sound of screams and battle now filled their senses, as if they were at the center of an amphitheater. Even though the ground seemed to shake with fear, they could almost feel the vibrations trembling through their bodies. The crawl lasted only a few meters, but the pain in their knees made it seem longer, until eventually the tunnel opened into a much larger passage. Pazrael and Krumpet stood and brushed off the loose rubble from their knees. The sounds of hell grew louder. The cries and screams echoed through the passage, and the vibrations coursed through their entire being. The passage before them, lit by the ever-intensifying orange glow, was cylindrical in shape and carved with natural rib-like features as it bore round to the left. They continued cautiously. Pazrael readied his bow. Krumpet tightened both fists firmly around his axe as the passage twisted round and eventually opened up before them. With eyes wide open, they approached the precipice. The ledge they stood on was large, wide, and concealed two dark passages on either side, but all they could see before them and far down below was in this moment all-consuming, for the precipice overlooked Avernus, the first level of hell. The desolate expanse of barren volcanic wasteland was a canvas of charred and blackened rock under the ominous red glow of a thick, smoky sky. The oppressing air was heated by rivers of lava that twisted and coursed their way through the land. The infamous River of Blood, the River Styx, was clearly visible, snaking away into the hostile and jagged mountains beyond. Amnitsu devils guarding the river's banks. Across the bleak landscape, imps in their thousands could be seen, as well as many other devils that roamed the land and skies. A spined devil appeared and hovered in front of them. dangerously close, and then, with a flap of its enormous wings, twirled into a nosedive upon some unsuspecting prey below. A steady flow of demons entered in their masses upon the river, all keen to disembark and engage in battle with the ever-ready devils. The land was littered with the skeletal remains of the torn and crumbling buildings and outposts, a result of a ferociously violent blood war. Cries of battle mingled with the screams of pain and torture. Far off in the distance, a large structure could be seen. The bronze citadel loomed. Pazrael and Krumpet, completely consumed by the horrific vista below them, were unaware that they were being watched. 5 small but muscular imp devils emerged from one of the side passages, drooling at the prospect of fresh meat. A loose stone crumbled under the talons of one of the beasts, and Pazrael turned to face them, drawing his bow and preparing a glowing red arrow for release. The leading devil suddenly bellowed with roaring laughter.
Your weapons are useless down here, maggot.
The following imps joined in the laughter, but they were quickly cut short as Pazrael released the arrow. It flew with a trail of red light, impacting the leading imp between his eyes, and the devil fell down dead. Now it was Krumpet that roared with laughter.
These weapons have been blessed with holy power, you devil scum!
The 4 remaining devils rushed at them, but no sooner had they taken their first steps, had Pazrael unleashed a flurry of arrows with ferocious speed. The squelch of multiple impacts happened almost simultaneously, the surround sound of gore bouncing off the walls as the devils fell. Krumpet lowered his axe.
Very impressive, Paz. I guess these devils are not so bad after all, eh?
From within the darkness of the side passage, glowing eyes preceded the arrival of several more imps.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Pazrael and Krumpet raised their weapons again and prepared for battle. But this time, strangely, the devils cowered, turned, and ran away.
Huh? What the hell, man? Where are you going? Come back!
Now, a familiar sound filled the air as a twirl of wind and smoke rushed around them and took form in the shape of an instantly recognizable apparition. The hunters spoke in unison.
The smoke man.
The voice, much stronger now, still whispered around them.
Welcome to Baator.
How did you do that?
Yeah, why did they run away from you, eh?
Silence!
The apparition lifted an arm as he uttered an unknown phrase.
Borskorem Infernialia.
Gradually, an orb began to evolve. It took on the appearance of liquid smoke as it formed in midair. It grew and stretched, and eventually circled around itself like a vertical maelstrom. And with his final words,
Join me.
The smoky apparition disappeared once more. Pazrael and Krumpet, eager to leave this place, but apprehensive of what deeper, darker horrors awaited them on the other side, readied themselves for whatever would come as they stepped forward and entered the portal. Pazrael and Krumpet emerged from the smoky blue portal and found themselves in Kanya, the 8th level of hell. Their cloaks tightened around their bodies after already enduring the infernal heat of Avernus. They now fought against the blistering cold of this god-forsaken place. Barely able to see through the relentless blizzard, enormous mountains and giant glaciers populated the horizon and seemed to move and transform before them, each shift causing numerous avalanches that could be felt more than heard over the incessant howling winds. Nearby, a river flowed, seemingly unable to be frozen, and a small wooden boat waited by the bank. Suddenly, a protective orb began to form around them, covering a vast area and allowing nothing to penetrate its transparent walls. until, within its completed protection, silence befell them. Now, a smoke began to twirl within the orb, and soon they were confronted with the apparition of the Smoke Man. But this time, the smoke, now filling its outline, transformed into a physical presence. Before them stood a large man, over 9 foot tall, but in human form, his hands held behind his back. This time, there were no greetings. His words no longer whispered or carried on the wind. His voice, much like his physical presence, was now strong and complete.
You have both parts of the tablet.
Yes, we do. Now just who are you?
That is not important right now,
said the man. And for the first time, unwillingly or not, his voice contained demonic undertones.
You must finish your quest and banish the Lord of Evil for good.
He motioned toward the nearby wooden boat.
Follow the river Styx to the 9th level of Baator, and make known your presence to lure Asmodeus. But, and this is very important, you must not be trapped in that lair. You must not be taken to the city, or you will never escape.
Pazrael and Krumpet shared a look of despair as they tried to maintain their composure.
You must continue to the deepest lair.
The man grinned sadistically, a smile that stretched wide across old and cracked cheeks.
Asmodeus is weaker there, and his wounds weep.
Now the man revealed an object from behind his back and reached out his arm.
Use this to eliminate him.
Pazrael accepted the strange crystal shard and studied the object. Needle-like in its appearance, it was extremely lightweight, unfathomably thin and fragile for its size, yet somehow it seemed unbreakable. The man allowed for some time to pass. It amused him how they stared. It amused him how easy it would be to crush these pathetic specimens. But not now. Not yet. For he still needed them a while longer.
This shard is imbued with a power from all 8 higher archdevils. Only once all are combined can Asmodeus be forgotten.
You mean you can kill him?
The man could not help but utter a slight chuckle at the dwarf's ignorance.
Fool! Asmodeus cannot be killed. But down there, in his weakened state, it is possible to incapacitate him and trap him down there forever.
Pazrael frowned, aware now that no good would come from any of this. But still, in the farthest reaches of his mind, she was there, praying, hoping to see him again.
But first, you must give me the tablet.
And what about your side of the bargain?
Would you like me to bring back your loved ones now? Of course not. Not here. I will hold my side once you are free and safe.
Well then, we'll give you the tablet off when we're free.
Angered, the man stepped forward, looming over them.
Give them to me.
But Pazrael and Krumpet stood fast, backing away, stepping out of the protective orb. Their senses were immediately pummeled by the overbearing climate. The man simply stared at them, partly baffled and partly admiring their resistance against the elements. Now, visibly angered, the man disappeared. Struggling to hold their footing in the wind and snow, the hunters made their way to the river's edge. The elongated wooden rowboat was stained black, brown, and dark red, a result of its untold years of service in the foul water. Aside from the single lantern on its bow, the boat was empty. The hull was adorned with skulls of varying degrees of degradation. It held no sails, no oars, no means of control. But upon boarding, the boat set off, cast by an unseen force, and began to follow the river down. Krumpet could not help but look over the edge. It was impossible to tell how deep the water was. The surface sludge floated along slowly, but the current below pulled fast at the boat. The water was dark, oily, and foreboding, and popped every now and then with bubbles of putrid stench. Indistinguishable things floated by, each one looking organic in some form. The stagnant size of the river collected lost limbs, torsos, and organs from untold battles. Time seemed to pass peculiarly here. They traversed the river slowly, but the land passed by in double speed. Some strange and supernatural dilation was at work. The river began to fall away as the shiny verge of a waterfall appeared ahead, and panic set in.
Hey, there's a bloody waterfall! Pez!
Yeah, I see it. Well, what do we do?
Shit, man!
What do we do?
The end of the river shifted in a blurred motion of speed and time, and what was once far was now immediately before them.
What the hell? Do we jump? Should we jump?
I'm not bloody jumping into that stuff, no way!
I don't think we have a choice now. Hold on to something.
But as the wooden craft slipped off the edge of the waterfall, its trajectory did not seem to change. The river's direction and flow appeared normal, yet they were falling, floating upon liquid air. The world around them turned from an icy cold, bright white, to the dark reds of an infernal hell. It was this transformation that informed them that they had now left Kanya. The river opened up wide, placid in its appearance, an unmoving, stagnant cesspit. It was the Forgotten Lake. A mist began to rise from the water, and within that mist, 1,000 tormented souls could be seen, twisted faces warped by fear, torment, and pain, altered by various states of gore and violence. Their whispered screams filled the lake and carried on the blooded water, begging for mercy, begging for release, begging for an end to their existence. Suddenly, they realized they had reached the end of the lake, and now the thick water cascaded down a canyon into a place much deeper, much darker. The transition happened in a blur, like an amnesia patient waking from an insufferably long episode. They arrived in Nessus. The barren, featureless plain of hard stone and sand stretched into the horizon. Vast chasms and colossal ravines ripped and teared through the land in all directions. In the distance, they could see the rising citadel of hell, Mal'Sheen. The words of the smoke man haunted them. If they were captured, they would be taken there, and if that happened, they would never leave this place. Nearby, a small group of lesser beasts hunched over their victim, quenching their ravenous thirst with the warm blood of their prey, and greedily devouring its still twitching flesh. Across the land, bodies of all known races, man and beast alike, were strapped to the jagged rock. Spiked poles and splintered, inverted wooden crosses, their bodies flayed, bones broken, and limbs severed. Some ripped in half at the torsos, others penetrated or impaled through multiple body parts with rusted metal and poisoned steel. Their feverishly infected wounds oozed pus and blood that dripped and covered the floor. An eternity of gangrenous rotten tissue and bodily fluids filled the air, with a stench fouler than foul.
Jeez.
Oh, my God.
Oh, stinks.
This place, it's
horrific.
Ahead, 2 minions, river guardians of Nessus, could be seen, toying with a severed limb by a small floodplain.
Look there.
Yep, I see them. I suppose that's our means of attraction.
Yeah. But how?
I have an idea. I'll give them a little warning shot.
Pazrael stood up and made sure he had good footing with the boat's unpredictable motion, and then fired an arrow. The arrow, slightly red, slightly yellow, flew through the air and impaled itself in the side of the nearest devil's head. The beast fell limp to the floor.
What? I thought you were going to do a warning shot, my bro.
Well, you saw the arrow. I guess it was yellow because,
You're scared?
No, more nervous. I told you yellow can be unreliable, didn't I?
The remaining devil roared at the death of its friend and cast an evil glare at the boat and its passengers, and flapping its wings, it rose to a hover. But once more, a protective bubble formed and surrounded the boat. The devil cocked its head in confusion. Angered, it flew away in the direction of the city, undoubtedly to inform of their intrusion.
Well, I guess that should do it, eh?
Yeah. I feel like we've just awoken the dragon.
Another shift occurred, another sickening motion of blurred speed and time, as they passed through a cavernous opening. The walls on either side, a deep dark red. Upon closer inspection, the steaming rock seemed to portray, or even contain, thousands of tormented souls, faces and skulls peering outward, trapped forever in stone. The horror of this place was beyond anything Pazrael or Krumpet could ever have imagined, and yet they had not reached the end of their descent. The river trickled down further and further, snaking round and round until the decrepit wooden boat could no longer traverse its waters, for they had now entered the Serpent's Coil, the deepest part of the Nine Hells, and the final destination on the River of Blood. Slowly, they departed the vessel that had offered them passage through Baator, and tightly they clutched their weapons. The tablet halves vibrated, hummed. Their power had been growing with every passing minute. Pazrael glanced at the crystal shard in his hand, still unaware of its true power, still unsure how to use it against the Lord of Evil. He would not have to wait much longer.
Here, just look at this place,
said Krumpet, circling in awe and terror.
Yeah, I'm trying not to, Krumpet. Never in my wildest dreams would I ever have imagined such a place.
Yeah, I for one cannot wait to get out of here. I can't stand the stench of it.
The pit was a spiraling canyon, cold, hard, desolate. Its formation carved from the impact of Asmodeus falling into hell from the upper realms. The low hum of an eternal wind filled the air. Droplets of unseen water echoed around them and mixed with sporadic crumbling of ancient rubble and stone. Pazrael, struggling to fathom a suitable description for the land they currently occupied, was unaware of the approaching tremor.
I mean, it's...
Hell is not a place for the faint of heart.
Krumpet immediately turned to face the direction of the voice, his axe glowing with intensity. Pazrael placed the crystal shard on the ground and readied an arrow as he studied the entity that floated toward him. The scorched rock walls seemed to tremble with vibrations as the larger-than-life being descended towards his guests. Eventually touching ground, the devil began a slow walk around them, seemingly fearless and in complete disregard for the weapons being pointed at him. Dressed immaculately in a long red and black robe, inlaid with gemstones and with a yellow and black turned-over collar and sleeves, this man, this beast, this devil loomed over them, standing erect and proper at over 13 feet tall. Unintentionally, Krumpet growled.
Now, Krumpet. There really is no need for bad tempers.
Krumpet recoiled, casting a confused look toward Pazrael.
What? How does he?
But Pazrael was silent, stunned, for he was having his own conversation with the devil.
How are you doing this? How are you in my mind?
Telepathy, my dear Pazrael. Tell me, why do you think you are here?
I don't...
What is this? What have you done to him?
The devil turned to Krumpet as he stroked his perfectly kept beard. Soft-spoken, extremely articulate, and outwardly confident, he whispered in Krumpet's native tongue, asking the dwarf for calmness.
Come near yourself, Lanky.
The devil stopped before them and stood perfectly still, calm, collected. His appearance was that of a slim, athletic man. He was captivatingly handsome in his features. Vivid red skin with glowing red eyes that pierced like blades and burned like orbs of liquid fire. Giant horns ruptured from his skull.
I will speak to you both now. Pazrael the Ranger, Stalker of Evil, Punisher of the Damned, and Krumpet van Tonder, the dwarf who seeks vengeance upon the orcs. Quite fortunate that you found each other, and indeed quite a bond that you have formed.
No response came, only mesmerizing stares.
At a loss for words, it seems.
The devil lifted his trusty rod, carved from a single ruby. It glistened with every move as he pointed it toward them.
I see you have some rather dashing cloaks there. Do you think they will help you?
Still the silence continued, as sweat began to pour and grips tightened around weapons.
I wonder if you can tell me why it is that you're here, in my home, without so much a courtesy of letting me know you were coming.
We followed the river. It brought us here.
Yes, the river does tend to flow down here. But that does not answer my question, little friend.
We have something for you. A shard,
said Pazrael as he returned the arrow to its quiver and retrieved the crystal shard from the ground. Asmodeus lifted his eyebrows as he teased the ranger once more with telepathy.
Do you see your loved one here?
Stop that. Stop doing that.
Huh? What happened? What did you do?
And what, pray tell, do you two plan to do with that crystal shard?
Pazrael and Krumpet cast an eye at each other, neither wanting to tell the truth, both knowing that the devil likely already knew the answer. A foulness began to fill the air. Asmodeus betrayed no signs of the intense pain he was feeling, for underneath his garments, wounds began to seep as they opened up. His clothes began to rip and tear apart. Black blood secreted from multiple lacerations. Krumpet acted on impulse.
He's wounded! He's weakening! Attack!
The dwarf rushed toward the devil, axe lifted high as he jumped and heaved his axe upwards. The devil did not move. His expression barely changed, and his smile did not fade, as he brought the ruby rod crashing down. The impact created a defensive shield around him. Krumpet bounced into the force of the shield's energy, and was sent flying across the pit.
Krumpet!
Pazrael ran at the devil, shard in hand, ready to plunge. Asmodeus gently waved an arm and spawned a ball of hellfire that burned as it flew over Pazrael's shoulders. The ranger ducked and rolled. In the corner of his eye, he saw his friend returning. Krumpet held his shield in both hands and launched it towards the devil. The shield glittered and sparked with lightning bolts as it pierced the air and flew towards the devil's head. Asmodeus turned, his eyes glowing like fire, yet his expression was one of serene calmness. The shield clashed with a ruby rod in a brilliant display of violent light. But the shield was only a distraction for Krumpet to gain some ground. The dwarf spun at dizzying speed and unleashed his axe with a furious throw. Asmodeus sidestepped, but as his robe followed, the axe caught it and ripped the cloth in two, before finally embedding into the rock. Again, Asmodeus waved his arm, and again, Krumpet was sent flying to the ground. While distracted, Pazrael had circled the devil, and leaping into the air, he attempted to bring the crystal shard down into the devil's back. Another shield of energy emerged from the ruby rod, and Pazrael stumbled backwards, dropping the shard with a clatter that echoed throughout the pit. Asmodeus launched another fireball, and this time it would not miss. Pazrael lifted his cloak to cover his body, and the fireball dissipated upon impact. Now the Lord spoke, his voice and tone unaltered. Still, he seemed charismatic, polite, almost compassionate.
You must excuse my previous benevolence. Please do not mistake it for any form of compassion.
The hunters picked themselves up while the devil continued.
Your cloaks are serving you well. I imagine without them, you would be dead already. But then, without them, you would not even be here.
Pazrael and Krumpet took a moment to regain their breath, regain their strength, for each single blow from the devil felt like 1,000. Crippling, breathtaking, immobilizing.
I sense your weapons have been altered too. Holy weapons have their uses against my minions. I'm intrigued. So I must ask, do you think that they will help you down here, in the darkest depths of hell, against me?
Krumpet, activating his inner powers, rushed again toward the devil with incredible speed. Gathering his shield from the ground and his axe from the rock wall, he turned to face Asmodeus. A fireball sped toward him that he deflected with incredible effort, his shield deflecting the blow. And now, the familiar, brilliant flashes of light flew in all directions as the fire impacted steel. Krumpet's armor began to glow. The Stormlord was with him now, and the fire would not stop him. He rolled to his side once, twice. With every maneuver, he gained ground, until finally he was within reach. His axe swung and arced through the air with blurring speed, lashing at the devil's robe, but never carving flesh. Pazrael reached for an arrow and fired at the devil's head. The yellow arrow missed. He fired another, and then another. Each was swatted from the air or blocked by some unseen energy. Asmodeus, comfortably dealing with Krumpet's frenzy, turned his head towards Pazrael. The devil's eyes, once glowing with fire, now turned the deepest black. A darkness of such intensity that its magnitude could fill any void. Its vacuum would bleed the life from an entire cosmos. Pazrael caught sight of him, and instantly his mind began to feel the intense pressure of 1,000 voices. For the devil had uttered a dark speech so awful that Pazrael's eyes began to bleed. His bow useless, his aim compromised, Pazrael mustered all the strength he could to run and join the fight with his friend. He wiped the blood away, and somehow he managed to compose himself. Holding the shard like a spear, he ran toward the devil. Now, Asmodeus fought both man and dwarf, parrying every strike, sidestepping every stab, and blocking every blow. Eventually, he became bored and unleashed a bolt of energy that sent the two hunters to the ground once more. But Krumpet would not go down so easily. The dwarf retrieved his axe and shield, and once again launched into a furious attack, fueled by Kord himself. Pazrael had not been so lucky, as he found himself dodging another spawn of hellfire, this one colliding with his shoulder. The fire erupted around him, catching the tail of his bandana and setting it on fire. He quickly removed the blue satin from his head and watched in despair as it turned to ashen embers in his hands. Emotions boiled over inside him as he watched one of the last remnants of his wife burn in front of him while the devil's laughter filled his mind. He lay motionless, distraught, overcome with sadness and loss. Krumpet's persistence finally delivered him blood as a swing from his axe caught the devil's leg. Asmodeus, now showing the slightest signs of anger, smashed Krumpet's axe and shield away, dropped his ruby rod to the ground, and picked the dwarf up by his neck. Krumpet's legs swayed in the air as he rose towards the devil's head, struggling for grip, struggling for breath. Asmodeus pummeled him with blow after blow after blow. Blood flowed freely from Krumpet's face. The dwarf fought back with every last bit of strength he could muster, but his body was becoming limp with every torturous strike. Pazrael rolled onto his side. Consumed with despair, futility began to set in. Through the blood that poured from his eyes, he could briefly make out his friend being beaten to a pulp. He tried to find his feet, try to save his friend, but his mental state was compromised, his sight almost blinded. He reached out for balance, but what he found was the crystal shard that lay on the ground beside him. There was only one thing he could do, one more thing he could try. Krumpet still received blow after sickening blow as he began to lose consciousness. Pazrael reached for the shard. It was so thin and immaculately smooth. It was like an arrow. He placed it within his bow and pulled it back, but the blood over his eyes offered no clear shot. He could only see red, only see his friend being beaten, only see the end of both of them through blurred eyes.
Help me, my love. Help me.
He whispered as he closed his eyes. Somehow he could feel her. He could sense her. The vision came to him so clear, so visceral, and so too did his aim. With eyes closed and a calmness within his heart, he fired. The shard flew with such accuracy and precision that the devil could only turn and watch as the crystal penetrated his ribcage and embedded itself deep within the devil's chest. Asmodeus dropped Krumpet to the ground as he too fell to his knees. In a brief moment of relative peace, man, dwarf, and devil remained motionless. And then the smoke appeared. This time, the man that formed was solid, real. He stepped out of the portal and onto the trembling ground. His voice differed as it took on its primal form, and he referenced the devil in the infernal language.
What's the matter, Asmodee? Feeling a little poorly?
Asmodeus looked up at the man as he rose to his feet and pulled a crystal shard from his body with a sickening spluttering of black blood. The wound would not heal. Not here. His wounds remained forever fresh down here. His skin, still blighted by wounds dating back to his fall from grace over a millennia ago, his body littered with bleeding injuries, while he was now and indeed is forever in excruciating pain, he somehow managed to portray the appearance of someone unconcerned by such torment. But his new injury felt different. The shard had unleashed a special venom into his body.
Ah, Mephisto.
Yes, Asmodeus. It is I.
While the devils were distracted, Pazrael rushed over to Krumpet and pulled him away from the towering beasts.
Krumpet, are you okay, friend?
Krumpet could only gurgle a response. Together, they watched as the Smoke Man transformed into his true self. The devil, Mephistopheles, a creature very similar in stature, yet far more barbaric than Asmodeus. A huge, diabolical hulk of muscle with fiendish claws, his monstrous wings equally as savage-looking as his horns. And although they had suspected all along that they were being misled, it was the final blow for them both that they had been fooled, lied to, tricked into doing the devil's work. Mephistopheles would not bring back their dead, not bring back their loved ones, and now, to add salt to their wounds, they were stuck in the darkest depths of hell. Asmodeus breathed heavily now.
How befitting of you to betray your lord.
Not just I, Asmodeus.
Then you shall all pay. What I do is in the interest of...
What you do is and always has been in the interest of yourself.
Mephistopheles approached the Lord of Evil.
With all your strength, all your power, you could have it all. But strangely, you are weak, Asmodeus. You plan so much, and yet you do not seem to do anything. You're too hesitant, too caught up in the details. Not enough action. Don't you see? You undertake such lengthy and complex plans, often requiring hundreds or thousands of years, centuries if not millennia, to see any form of fruition. And all for your own goals. We cannot wait that long, Asmodeus. You manipulate our forces and maneuver your pawns like chess pieces in your grand infernal board. Slowly and ever so subtly, you manipulated us all.
Asmodeus regarded his fellow devil with indifference. Anger, frustration, and betrayal would clearly be bubbling up inside him, but his exterior portrayed a Zen-like mindfulness. Mephistopheles chuckled to himself.
You once walked into Mount Celestia and survived using only your words and your wits. I would have taken it with brute force and bloodshed. And now, I can take over, backed by my lower brothers, and we can dominate the mortal realms and rule under lawful evil.
Mephistopheles reached out an arm towards Pazrael and Krumpet. The tablet halves activated and tugged, eventually releasing themselves from the satchels and containers that had held them prisoner. The hunters were helpless against the wielded force of the devil's power. Now, clutching both halves in his hands, Mephistopheles connected them, unifying the tablet after millennia, and a shockwave of energy ruptured from the core and filled the pit. The tablet began to excrete a smoky substance that whispered a recital in the infernal language.
Once combined, the tablet instructs the recital that can be used to summon a portal to the mortal realms, Asmodeus,
said Mephistopheles. He turned to face the two injured hunters.
A devil cannot simply wander the mortal planes and retrieve it. I needed someone to bring it to me. And I also needed the blood of a pure soul to awaken it.
Slowly, but with increasing vigor, Asmodeus began to laugh.
You fool! You know that no devil can port out of this place.
Mephistopheles simply smiled as he began to recite his own spell, a dark magic that cast out from within him and slithered across the ground. As he did so, it began to collect the spilled blood from Pazrael and Krumpet that had been shed from their battle with Asmodeus. The blood lifted and swirled in the air, and then was pulled in and consumed by the tablet. And with this, a light was projected, and a portal opened before them. Seeing this, Asmodeus finally dropped his mask, anger and hatred beginning to boil over, and although partially paralyzed, he began to transform into his true self, a huge, snake-like creature. His body broke and ruptured as the skin stretched and his features deformed. Soon, a massive, wingless, and scaled serpent, hundreds of miles long, would appear. It was an image that most could not manage, a sight that was unseeable. Almost none have ever witnessed this form, and those that did would surely die. Mephistopheles could not let the transformation take place. He needed to end this now. The crystal shard needed to penetrate deep. The venom had not yet properly immobilized Asmodeus. It needed more time. It needed a deeper wound. He ran towards Asmodeus and knocked the devil backwards while he grabbed the shard from his hand. Asmodeus tried to summon his ruby rod, but Mephistopheles intercepted and swatted it from the air. Now, the two devils raged upon each other. Sickening blows were delivered to flesh as fierce talons ripped the skin and carved into bone. Sickening black blood flew in all directions. Explosions of magic echoed across the pit, and brilliant flashes of light were cast out into the air. The two devils engaged ferociously in violent combat, as Asmodeus continued to morph into something else. Beaten, dazed and bloodied, Pazrael and Krumpet were dazzled by the display of violence before them. But Pazrael, seeing their chance for freedom, wasted no time.
Quickly, Krumpet!
He said painfully, rising to his feet and helping the fallen dwarf to his.
We must reach the portal.
Krumpet summoned every last ounce of his strength to move his broken body, slowly, painfully, toward freedom.
Come on, Krumpet.
Neither of them looked back. They had seen enough. Still, anxiety filled their hearts as they approached the portal. The things they had seen here, the things they had experienced here, haunted their mind and would do so forevermore. Eventually, as the battle raged behind them, they reached the portal. A clash of crystal upon stone sounded as once again the shard had been flung from combat and landed beside them. Krumpet reached for it and handed it to Pazrael.
You must close the portal.
Pazrael nodded.
Can you stand?
Yeah, my bro, I can.
Carefully, Pazrael released his grip on Krumpet and placed the shard within his bow.
Then ready yourself, Krumpet. We only have one chance at this.
I was born ready.
Pazrael stood, searching the pit for the stone tablet, and upon finding it, he locked on with the focus of 1,000 rangers. His ancestors shining through with an aim so true, it became his only vision. He lifted the bow and pulled back the string.
Now, Krumpet.
And as the two hunters fell backwards through the portal, Pazrael released the shard. It flew through the air as together the hunters disappeared and the projectile hit its target, shattering the stone tablet into pieces, and with it, the portal closed. Pazrael and Krumpet arrived with a thud, back in the mortal plane, turning in time to see the portal exit close. For some time, they simply lay where they fell. The sound of a nearby river, coupled with a plethora of bird call, relaxed them. They were not home. They never would be again. But for now, they were safe. Krumpet fought the urge to fall asleep as his body began to shut down. He needed to recover. He needed a long rest.
You did it, Paz.
We did it, Crumbs.
Well, I guess I did kind of take the brunt of it back there, eh?
A moment of silence befell them as Krumpet inspected his wounds, and Pazrael brushed his fingers through his now exposed hair. His bandana was gone forever, but his memories of her remained.
It was all for nothing. We achieved nothing. Our loved ones are still
gone. Krumpet stirred as he turned to face his friend.
Nah, bro. We destroyed the tablet. We prevented the hells from spilling out into the mortal plane. We foiled their plans.
Yeah, I guess we did, didn't we? You're right, Krumpet.
It might not seem like it to us, but at least we caused some disturbance down there, eh? They'll be busy fighting it out for a while.
I bet they will, Krumpet. I bet they will.
Krumpet looked around at the creek. A forest of bamboo lay beyond it.
Where are we?
I don't know. But if it's okay with you, I think I might just have a little sleep before our next adventure. Agreed?
Yeah. Agreed, my bro.
As the hunters lay back in the long grass, they slowly drifted away. And as they did so, unbeknown to them, a strange, distant, almost inaudible laughter could be heard.
And you will see two adventurers with a destiny. Their blades are sharp, their aim is true. Facing danger, not a gun for you. Altered state adventures. Altered state adventures. Altered state adventures. Altered state adventures. Altered state adventures.